him, that the reason new Africans and Mexicanos took to the streets of South Central was the result of his filmed beating. That, of course, is typical of mechanical bourgeois thinking. What it's not typical of, however, is someone from the hood. And this cuts both ways. No one in the hoods and barrios ever thought it was about Rodney King. We'd all seen the film over and over like everyone else, but that was par for the course. We'd always seen that, long before anybody caught it on tape. Actually, we'd experienced much more than that. Why, it's safe to say that the hoods had gone to war with each other in vicious waves of internal, intra-class combat for much less than that. Though, because of a general colonial mentality which prevents the challenging of bottom-up oppression, the same hood forces will not, in any systemic way, wage war on the pigs, or for freedom, land, and socialism. Rodney King alone and of his own accord would not have thought to hold a press conference to ask the asinine question in the form of a whimpering request, can't we just all get along? The fact of the matter is, we are getting along. New Africans and Mexicanos are getting along just fine. What we couldn't understand was why he was admonishing us for getting at the exploiters of our communities. The impression he gave with his handler's hands up his back like a ventriloquist troll was that a race riot was going on, as if we had all begun to kill each other or burn and rob each other's homes. His handlers compelled him to send up a false flag, a diversion. But you see, this was the very thing that exposed the class interests and reactionary politics of the Uncle Toms that had been designated to handle him, and by extension, us. Let's go back for a minute. Let's talk social development, aka history. There exists a fundamental contradiction in our lives that, like an elephant in the room, no one wants to acknowledge. As a consequence of the war waged upon various African nations by European powers, those of us captured and kidnapped were taken out of our own self-determining social developments and violently forced into Euro-American history. This is not simply a clever play on words. This is a reality. We lost the ability to control our own destiny. Read that again. From that time until now, the fundamental basic contradiction between the U.S. oppressor nation and our own oppressed and colonized nation has been the governing imperialist relationship, which is to say, us not being in control of the qualitative factors that determine our lives as a people, as a nation. Our tradition of struggle against this fundamental contradiction has taken many forms, some hidden or obscured, some open and hostile. But all of these have been open to resolve the fundamental contradiction and to regain our independence. While there have been some bona fide struggles to resolve the contradiction, there have also been reactionary neocolonial struggles waged by internal enemies loyal to the oppressor nation and culture that have tried time and time again to subvert and control our destiny for the benefit of the capitalists. They've come among us, always imposed from above, stirring up emotions and giving lip service to progress, equality, justice, and prosperity. These always within the colonial confines of the oppressor's arrangements, and none collectively ever materialize, because without a resolution of the fundamental contradiction, that is the freeing of our productive forces from U.S. imperialism and the governing of our own affairs, we'll remain a minority within the American system as opposed to a majority in our own, and subjected to the established bourgeois social contract, i.e. colonialism, neo and post. We can parade all through the empire with black congressmen, black mayors, black governors, black police chiefs, black Supreme Court justices, hell, even a black president. And absolutely nothing will alter the genocidal relationship that governs our national oppression here, because the blacks are part of the colonial apparatus. They have made a strategic alliance with the capitalist imperialists to act as go-betweens in our oppression and exploitation. This is a conscious class stand. The black petty bourgeois is not innocently confused, like, say, Mrs. Jackson across the street is, about our national oppression, about the existence and subjugation of New Africa. They are well-read, have traveled in our experience. They've just chosen sides against us and in favor of our historical enemies. And the sooner we recognize and internalize this, the better off we'll be. Black ain't nothing but a color. As a designation of our national identity, it has played out. It is a superficial understanding at best and a foolish and dangerous analysis at worst. We have no collective control over the qualitative factors which determine our lives. We do not, in other words, control our destiny, not as a people or a state. The book is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Senator
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, happy Wednesday. Donald Trump goes full authoritarian dictator. Typically, the first hour of our program, Congressman Mark Pocan is here with us to take your calls for the hour. We're moving that to the second hour today because I think both of us just wanted to give you and me and all of us basically a chance to process what happened last night. This was a serious and consequential assault on democracy, on the idea of democracy, on the idea of any kind of civilized discourse in a society. It was absolutely astonishing. So anyhow, our Middays with Mark segment, if you have a question specifically for Congressman Mark Pocan, hold it until our second hour, and he will be here for the entire second hour taking your calls. And in our third hour, we're going to be talking about zoonotic diseases, as is COVID. It's a disease that came from animals, and how the next pandemic might come about, God forbid. But to last night, I mean, a couple of questions or a couple of thoughts. Number one, given that Donald Trump is not he doesn't respect rules, right? In fact, I think that this is probably the story of his entire life. He hired people to take his tests for him in school, according to his niece's autobiography. He lies to banks and inflates the value of his assets. He lies to the IRS and decreases the value of his assets. Or if he's telling the IRS the truth, he's $400 million in debt, way in over his head, and desperately in crisis. So, if he lies about all these, and he obviously has lied to his wives, about what he's up to and who he is and all this. So, although Melania said, I knew who he was when I married him. In other words, it's a transaction, right? So here we've got a guy who absolutely is out for himself and nothing else, period, full stop, who also knows that if he loses this election, or if he can't figure out a way to stop from losing this election, if he can't figure out a way to hang on to power, in all probability, 6 months or a year from now, he's going to be looking at prison. And his kids, too. They're all in on the con. And in fact, it probably goes way beyond that. You've got what do you call it? An oversight group, a watchdog group, yesterday charged that the Trump campaign has laundered over $140 million in campaign contributions. They're basically just moving it into corporations, calling it consulting fees and things like that, and sticking it in their pockets. Which makes perfect sense when you discover how broke he is. But it raises the question, if this is the kind of person who is going to be in a debate, somebody who has no respect for basically anything, and certainly no self-respect, then how do you do the debate? We've got 2 more debates that are scheduled. Should they only turn on the mic when the person is called on? And then only open both mics when it's time for people to have a dialogue? The upside of that is we could actually have a debate and hear about issues. But Trump is going to do everything he can to avoid that because he's got no issues. I mean, the only issues that were discussed plus, by the way, if they did that, everybody would say, oh, well, the debate moderators are making it easier for Biden. But the only issues that were discussed last night, Joe Biden tried to bring up the fact that Donald Trump is trying to take away health care from 30 million Americans and wipe out protections on pre-existing conditions. And Trump simply lied. He said, no, I've got a great health care plan. 3.5 years in, 4.5 years since he announced his candidacy and said he had a great health care plan. We still haven't seen it. Why? Because it doesn't exist, as Biden pointed out. So Trump is, he's great at destroying things. He has destroyed multiple businesses in his life. He has destroyed the lives of lots and lots of people. He's a destroyer. But he's not a builder. He doesn't know how to create things that have lasting value. And the few things that he has created property-wise are all losing a fortune and have been apparently for decades. Thus 6 bankruptcies. So anyhow, the only issues that were discussed last night, number one, the Affordable Care Act, he lied. Number two, the economy, and the impact of the coronavirus. And again, Trump lied about that and tried to make it himself the victim. No words of, oh my God, isn't it sad that, 207,000 Americans are dead and 1 million Americans are infected with a virus that is going to, that could devastate them. 7 million. So, and taxes. I mean, Joe Biden brought up Trump's tax cut, and Trump was like, "Oh, that was a wonderful thing." It's like, so how do you handle a debate where one of the parties in the debate has absolutely no interest in discussing the issues, and when the issues do come up, will lie through his teeth about them, and therefore everything he was doing was throwing chum in the water, throwing blood in the water, throwing dust into the face of his opponent. Everything he was doing last night was an attempt to divert, deflect, distract. That was it. And the polls are in. There was an overnight opinion poll. They found, as I recall, 54% of Americans thought Joe Biden won the election. This was a report on CNN just a few minutes ago. 54% of Americans thought Joe Biden won. 34% of Americans thought Donald Trump won. But I can tell you, the Daily Stormer, the official Nazi website, their headline today is "Trump is the greatest person on earth." Their article starts out, "The takeaway from the debate is this: Donald Trump is the greatest person on earth. He shouldn't be president. He should be king. If he were king, he wouldn't have to deal with all of the scum in Congress, the scum that runs his government, and he could deal directly with the needs of the people." That's what the Nazis had to say this morning. Over on Fox News, this is what David Bossie wrote, quote, "To any reasonable person watching, it was clear that President Trump came prepared and resoundingly defeated former Vice President Joe Biden at Tuesday night's first presidential debate in Cleveland." Meanwhile, the Trump family came in wearing masks, and that was shown on TV, and then they sat down and took off their masks. They were the only ones there. There were apparently a few other people on Trump's side of the audience who didn't wear masks, but by and large, it was the Trump family, the Trump children. Melania wore her mask throughout the whole thing, but everybody else took them off. And one of the doctors, I mean, they had hired this hospital to provide, it was Cleveland Clinic, co-sponsored this thing, and they were providing, advice on what to do and how to do it. And, President Donald Trump's family ignored coronavirus guidelines. They sat in the row without masks. And then one of the doctors came over during the debate, or just as it was about to start, and asked them to put on their masks. Said, "These are the rules. You must put on the mask." And they basically said, "Screw you. Who do you think you are? We're God's gift to the world. Don't you know? We're the Trump family. We don't live by rules. Rules are for the little people. Little people pay taxes. Little people follow rules. We're Trumps. Screw your rules." That was essentially their message. Some of the best one-liners from Joe Biden. "You're the worst president that America has ever had. The fact is, everything he's saying is simply a lie. Everyone knows he's a liar. It's hard to get a word in with this clown, this person. Trump wouldn't know a suburb unless he took a wrong turn. And he's Putin's puppy. And this isn't about his family or my family, it's about your family." That was a pretty brilliant line. But how do you make this happen? Oh, and then I got to tell you my take on exactly what Donald Trump was doing last night. I think he was just going full authoritarian dictator. What we saw last night was classic dictator playbook. And I've got a real brief rant I'll share with you on the other side of this break about that, and we'll pick up your phone calls.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
15 minutes past the hour. Stick around. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Jim in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Jim, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Yes, sir. I just wanted to know that if come Inauguration Day, if the results of the election have not been certified, does Trump continue to be our leader?
No. No, his term in office ends, the Constitution is quite explicit about this, ends at noon on January 20th. If there is no one who has been identified as the successor, as the new president, then I'm guessing that, but this has never been adjudicated, right? This is the sort of thing the Supreme Court would figure out, I believe. But basically, I think that at that point in time, probably the presidency goes to Nancy Pelosi, but I could be wrong. That's the presidential line of succession. It's a good question, Jim. I'm sorry I don't have a crisp answer for you, but I doubt that. In fact, I think I can pretty much guarantee that's not going to play out that way, that we will know. I mean, December 8th is the so-called safe harbor date, and that's the date that every state is supposed to have their electoral college votes submitted to Congress so that they can be certified. I believe it's December 18th. I believe it's 10 days later. I might be off by a couple days on that. That is the official date in the law. That's the date that Congress has to certify the election. And
even if he tries to tie it up in litigation? Well,
no, that pauses everything. I mean, this is what we saw with Bush v. Gore. And although I'm sorry, I don't, right off the top of my head, I don't remember when Bush v. Gore was decided or resolved. Yeah, that's. I need to go back and read that case and find out, because this is just nuts. Everything that's going on. Let me just look at Gore here. Bush v. Gore. There we go. It was decided on December 12th, 2000. So that was before that December 18th date. And we didn't even get close there to pushing the other, being on the other side of that safe harbor time, or whatever you want to call it. So,
but couldn't Trump's lawyers tie it up, and how lawyers work? They can prolong
clearly their plan.
Something.
Yeah, this is clearly their plan, Jim, and they're going to have a couple of different things. I mean, he's laid out two different strategies here. One is the Bush v. Gore strategy, which is basically have the Supreme Court give him the presidency, as George Bush did in 2000. And the other is the 1876 Sam Tilden Rutherford B. Hayes strategy, where the Democrat won both the Electoral College and the popular vote, but the Republican became president because it got thrown to the House. The House created a commission to figure it out. They kind of delegated it, as it were. And the commission came up with this compromise of, we'll withdraw all the Union troops from the South, which would make the Democrats happy, if the Democrats don't demand that their presidential candidate, Sam Tilden, become president, and instead allow the Republican candidate, Rutherford B. Hayes, who is supposed to be, managing the occupation of the South, if he'll just allow that to end. And that stabbed African Americans in the back for over 100 years, that election of 1876. But those are the two precedents that he's looking at. And that's what he's thinking about. And he's going to try and play them at the same time, as far as I can tell. We'll be back. It's 20 minutes past the hour. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. Hey, thanks so much for supporting. So we've got a new video up for regular supporters of our program over at ThomHartmann.com, and this is about just a totally bizarre story about these three guys with no VA experience, not even veterans, who are all big shots down at Mar-a-Lago, that Donald Trump has put in charge of the Veterans Administration functionally. And their association, one of them is the head of Marvel Entertainment, their association with Johnson & Johnson and the New York Stock Exchange, and Johnson & Johnson, the big drug company, taking this very, very cheap chemical ketamine tweaking the molecule a little bit and rolling it out as a new anti-suicide drug, Spravato, that in clinical trials caused 6 people to die, 3 of them by suicide, and none of the people taking the placebo to die. And now Trump is telling the VA, you have to buy this highly inflated price drug from Johnson & Johnson, and the Democrats want to know what's up with the VA crowd guys. Check it out. It's at ThomHartmann.com. So we've got a new video up for regular supporters of our program over at ThomHartmann.com.
I probably should have opened with this, but I think this question of, what do we do going forward is a really important question. But what we saw last night, in my opinion, pure and simple, was the dictator's playbook. There is no other way to describe it. You tell violent white supremacist racists to stand by and encourage them to show up at polling places to intimidate voters. That's right out of the dictator's playbook. You bully and bluster and threaten like Mussolini did. This is, by the way, go back and watch some of the old footage of Mussolini. This is how Mussolini behaved. He promoted his brand as, I'm the tough guy, when in fact, Mussolini was a lazy coward just like Donald Trump is. You claim that the other side is evil like Hitler did. You personalize that. Those socialists, setting up excuses for state-run police violence when you're in charge of the state, along with brutality from vigilante groups, as Trump clearly called out to last night. You trash-talk democratic institutions like the vote, like Hungary's Viktor Orban does and Saudi Arabia's dictator Mohammed bin Salman does. Millions of Americans are struggling with the loss of their jobs, 30 million specifically. Lack of health care during a pandemic. So at least 20 million people have lost their health care on top of the 30 or 40 million who never had it. And an absolutely gutted social safety net after 40 years of Reaganomics has shortened and shortened and shortened the period that people can get long-term unemployment and cut the level of benefits you can get with things like food stamps and housing assistance. And with all that going on, millions of people in crisis, all Trump could do was brag, yell, and threaten. He never once said to the American people, I care about you. I am going to do something for you. Because he doesn't. And he hasn't. He's been president for 3.5 years. And he hasn't done anything for the average American people. He's passed a huge tax break for his billionaire buddies and for himself. And he has cut environmental regulations so that his coal mining buddies can dump waste in rivers, poisoning children. He's gutted the other EPA protections. You know the list. I don't need to go through it. But this is just classic dictator playbook. The only winner of last night's debate, so-called debate, was oligarchy and dictatorship. Russia, China, and authoritarianism around the world were the big winners last night. America was the big loser. And by the way, the Senate Intelligence Committee, or maybe it was the House Intelligence, one of them, either the House or Senate Intelligence Committee, this morning released an unclassified report pointing out that China has just executed 20 people who were working for the United States. We had 20 spies in China. They penetrated our top secret communication system for communicating with our spies in China. Once they penetrated it, they figured out who was working for us, and they executed them. We've got a serious problem here. So, anyway, Burl in Sierra Vista, Arizona. Hey, Burl, what's on your mind today?
Well, I wanted to respond to Trump's comments last night on the VA, where he claims that the VA is a much better system now than it was before he took office. Sure. I've been in that system 52 years, and the last 3 have seen the lowest level of performance, in my opinion. I give absolute kudos to the people who work there. They're fantastic. They're great. Mm-hmm. But we've seen some changes. One of the big ones is, wait times have gotten longer. It's much more difficult now to see a doctor. You're going to see a nurse or a nurse practitioner. That's a big change. The other thing is the Veterans Choice Program, which originally was a good program. Now they're trying
to passed by Obama
into that. But yeah, I know Obama started that. But they're trying to push everybody into it. Yeah, if you try to get an appointment, that's what the first thing you're going to hear about. And I finally told them, no, I'm not interested anymore. I want to see people in the VA. I've had 3 surgeries at one VA hospital. They've been great, but that was before Trump came in. So he's way off base with this.
Yeah, he's got 3 guys down at Mar-a-Lago who have no military experience, never been in the military, and they are running the Veterans Administration from Mar-a-Lago by proxy. They've never been confirmed by the Senate. Their names aren't, their names are public. You can read about it in the New York Times. But, this is how bizarre it gets, right? You pay $200,000 to Donald Trump to be a Mar-a-Lago member, and you get to run the VA.
Yeah, I learned that from you, by the way.
Yeah. Well, it's not a secret. This is something that has been widely reported and commented on, and it's grim. Burl, I'm sorry to hear that the VA is not meeting your needs. I hope that things get better. I think and I wish you the best. Hope is probably the best word of the day. Joe Biden is doing a train trip through Ohio and Pennsylvania, and God, I hope he's keeping safe. I don't know about ventilation on trains these days, but in any case, he gave a speech this morning, and he talked about hope. It's a word we need right now.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back with your calls after this. How do we deal with this? How do we, should we go forward with debates? What is your sense of last night? Let's process this.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Defying Hitler by Sebastian Haffner, a memoir. This is from chapter 17, about a little more than a third of the way into the book. At first, the revolution only gave the impression of being an historical event like any other, a matter for the press that might just possibly have some effect on the public mood. The Nazis celebrate January 30th as their day of revolution. They are wrong. There was no revolution on January 30th, 1933, just a change of government. Hitler became chancellor, by no means the Führer of the Nazi regime. The cabinet contained only 2 Nazis apart from him. He swore an oath of allegiance to the Weimar Constitution. The general opinion was that it was not the Nazis who had won, but the bourgeois parties of the right, who had captured, in quotes, the Nazis and held all the key positions in the government. In constitutional terms, events had taken a much more conventional, unrevolutionary course than most of what had happened during the previous 6 months. Outwardly also, the day had no revolutionary aspects, unless one considers a Nazi torchlight procession through Wilhelmstrasse or a minor gunfight in the suburbs that night as signs of a revolution. For most of us outsiders, the experience of January 30th, 1933 was that of reading the papers and the emotions we felt while we were doing so. The morning headline was, "Hitler called to president." That produced a certain nervous, impotent irritation. Hitler had been called to the president in August and November. He had been offered the vice-chancellorship and then the chancellorship. Both times he had set impossible conditions, and both times there had been solemn declarations, "Never again." Each time, "never again" had lasted exactly 3 months. Hitler's opponents in Germany at that time suffered from a compulsive urge to offer him everything he wanted, indefatigably, and at an even cheaper price. Indeed, to press it upon him. It's the same now with his opponents outside Germany. Again and again, this appeasement was formally renounced, and again it gaily reappeared at the crucial moment. Just so today. Then, as now, one's only hope was Hitler's own unreasonableness. Would it not sooner or later exhaust the patience of his opponents? Then, as now, it became apparent that their patience knew no bounds. At midday, the headline said, "Hitler makes impossible demands." We nodded, half reassured. It was only too credible. It would have gone against his nature to ask for less than too much. Perhaps the cup had once more passed from us. Hitler, the last defense against Hitler. At about 5 o'clock, the evening papers arrived. Cabinet of National Unity formed. Hitler Reichschancellor. I don't know what the general reaction was. For about a minute, mine was completely correct. Icy horror. Certainly this had been a possibility for a long time. You had to reckon with it. Nevertheless, it was so bizarre, so incredible to read it now in black and white. Hitler Reichschancellor. For a moment, I physically sensed the man's odor of blood and filth, the nauseating approach of a man-eating animal, its foul, sharp claws in my face. Then I shook the sensation off, tried to smile, started to consider, and found many reasons for reassurance. That evening, I discussed the prospects of the new government with my father. We agreed it had a good chance of doing a lot of damage, but not much chance of surviving very long. A deeply reactionary government with Hitler as its mouthpiece. Apart from this, it did not really differ much from the two governments that had succeeded Bruning's. Even with the Nazis, it would not have a majority in the Reichstag. Of course, that could always be dissolved, but the government had a clear majority of the population against it, in particular the working class, which would probably go communist now that the Social Democrats had completely discredited themselves. One could prohibit the communists, but that would only make them more dangerous. In the meantime, the government would be likely to implement reactionary social and cultural measures with some anti-Semitic additions to please Hitler. That would not attract any of its opponents to its side. Foreign policy would probably be a matter of banging the table. There might be an attempt to rearm. That would automatically add the outside world to the 60% of the home population who were against the Hitler government. Besides, who were the people who had suddenly started voting Nazi in the last 3 years? Misguided ignoramuses, for the most part, victims of propaganda, a fluctuating mass that would fall apart at the first disappointment. No, all things considered, this government was not a cause for alarm. The only question was what would come after it. It was possible that they would drive the country to civil war. The communists were capable of going on the attack before a prohibition against them came into force. The next day, this turned out to be the general opinion of the intelligent press. It is curious how plausible an argument it is, even today, when we know what came next. How could things turn out so completely different? Perhaps it was just because we were all so certain that they could not do so, and relied on that with far too much confidence. So we neglected to consider that it might, if worse came to worse, be necessary to prevent the disaster from happening. Through the whole of February 1933, everything that happened remained a matter for the press. In other words, it took place in an arena that would lose all reality for 99% of the population the moment there were no newspapers. Admittedly, enough occurred in that arena. The Reichstag was dissolved, then in a flagrant breach of the Constitution, Hindenburg also dissolved the Prussian regional parliament. There were fast and furious changes of personnel in the civil service. The book defined Hitler.
On the science revolution this week, Trump never noticed a modern-day American disaster. He's trying to spread the virus as far and wide as possible. We should call this today what history will call it when it looks back on this moment, genocide. David Kraft with the Nuclear Energy Information Service is here. It's time to end Exelon's nuclear hostage crisis. Climate risks are compounding financial challenges for Midwest nuclear plants. Plus, Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist II of Michigan drops by to explain that racism is a public health crisis. Tune into the Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are available. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Mike in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind?
Oh, good afternoon. I have a very simple solution for the next debate.
Okay.
Do it virtually. You have one
I think you're right.
One physical location. You have another candidate in another location, and the moderator is in a third location. This way, the camera can pan on one candidate. If he doesn't get an answer, pan away from him, go to the next candidate, and if those shenanigans begin, mute him and go on to the next candidate.
Yeah, it could certainly
have total control.
Yeah, I agree. And again, though, Trump is relying on basically physical intimidation. It's what he kept doing. And every time Biden would take the bait, I winced last night. But But that would eliminate that physical intimidation. That's the upside for all of us. The downside is that, his bully boy followers are going to say, oh, they're protecting Mike Pence again. But I think you're onto something, Mike. Thank you very much. Louise in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Hey, Louise, what's up?
Well, I listened to the whole debate, and I waited for something that was really going to jump out at me. And the thing that jumped out at me was when he said to stay tuned to the white supremacists, and stand by. And then I remember him panning the audience at Elizabeth. I'm trying to be really fast.
It's okay.
RBJ Ginsburg. At her funeral, and he's standing there with that mask on, and they're yelling, "Vote him out!" And those beady little snake eyes are looking around, and I thought, another term, he's going to kill us.
Yeah, I remember that moment too, thinking he is thinking vengeful thoughts right now. He was not running against Joe Biden last night. He was running against America. He was running against democracy. He was running against our republic. He was running against the idea of free and fair elections. He was running against the idea of an egalitarian, nation of laws. That's what he was running against. And we need to be very clear about that. Donald Trump is not running against Joe Biden. He's running against America. Louise, thank you. I share your concern. Matt in Vancouver, Washington. Hey, Matt, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how was your night?
I pretty much quit drinking a month or two ago because I was finding that, a glass of wine with dinner was becoming 2 glasses of wine with dinner, and, a couple nights a week was becoming every night. I thought, this is not a good thing. So I quit. Last night, 15 minutes into the debate, I got up, walked across the room to the kitchen, pulled out a bottle of wine, and poured myself a glass. That's how bad it was, Matt. How about you?
I feel sorry for all the mental health professionals around the country this morning whose phones are probably ringing off the hook.
Yes, I agree. This is not a good thing for America.
So let me get to my point here. I've been on the conservative COVID tour basically this summer for my job. I've been to Texas. I've been to Utah. I've been to Alabama and Georgia. And I've spoken with a lot of Trump supporters in some pretty rural areas in a lot of those states. And the one thing I can kind of get to that I really feel that these Trump supporters, and you've touched on this before, is the owning of the libs. And I also think that they feel that this country has let them down so badly for so long, and they've been lied to by every single candidate that's come through their town, whether it be a Democrat or a Republican, that they just want to see the country burn. And that's the 30% that said Trump won that debate last night. Like you said, he's running against America. And they... we have to... Go ahead.
Let me just insert something here, Matt. I've talked about this many times. I'm of the opinion that that what Reagan did, when Reagan said that he was going to gut the middle class, destroy unions, and basically, end the welfare state, as it were, end the support of people in crisis. The consequence of that was that 30 years on, 10 years ago, in 2010, for the first time since basically the end of World War II, the American middle class, fewer than half of Americans were in the middle class any longer. When Reagan came into office, I don't recall the exact number, but it was in the 60%. Now it's less than 50%, fewer than 50%. So you've got a lot of people out there who are like, yeah, I have been screwed. My wages are lower, my benefits are lower. We just got to notice, we pay health insurance for our employees. We just got to notice a couple of days ago that our health insurance premiums are going, really up. I mean, it's like, mind-boggling. And it's like we're all being screwed. And it's the logical consequence of 40 years of Reaganism. But those Trump supporters, they're not thinking in those terms. They don't understand, that there's been a 40-year campaign against them. They just know that they got screwed. They're pissed off. And Trump says, hey, if you're pissed off, I'm your guy. Back to you, man.
Yeah, exactly. And now that, that he's kicked that rock over and exposed all the worms and earwigs of the white supremacists that all lived in their little corners of the world, and we knew they were there, but now they have a platform, and he gave them total ammunition last night, which was completely dangerous. And I am fairly nervous about what the next couple of months are going to look like. I hope and I pray that every single person who is leaning Democrat, who was a Bernie supporter, who was Elizabeth Warren supporter, gets up and goes and votes for Joe Biden. It is critical that every single person do it. You have to overwhelm the numbers to the point that they can't cheat this election. And that is what's going to save here. And we've got to reach out to Trump supporters when this is all said and done, God willing and God praying that Joe Biden wins this thing. And we've got to heal these divisions, because we as a country,
I agree.
We can't go on like this anymore. We cannot go on like this.
And Biden made that point last night, man. You know, he said, if I'm elected president, I will be the president for all of America. And Donald Trump has made it very clear that he's not interested in being the president of all America. He's interested in being the president of red state America, period, full stop. In fact, on April 8th or 9th, I forget which day it was, we now know, Jared Kushner supervised that meeting in the White House where when they got the report that the majority of people dying from COVID were black or brown people. At that point, they had this whole plan to send masks to everybody. The post office was ready, 5 masks going to literally every human being in America. And Kushner said, pull the plug on it. It's only happening in the blue states. This will actually work to our political advantage. And that's how cynical and how, frankly, in my opinion, evil these guys are. Thanks a lot for the call. David in Spotswood, New Jersey. Hey, David, what's up?
I have the same sentiment as your previous caller. I just took a ride to Cumberland and Atlanta. I did a 55-mile bike ride, and every Trump sign was bigger and better than the next. If we don't have a landslide election, I don't know what these people are going to do. I mean, if we overwhelmingly beat Trump, I think we'll be okay. But if we don't, I mean, it's a cult. I don't know if it's what Lyndon B. Johnson said, is if a white man is willing to have his park picketed so long as he's greater than a black man, or it's some sort of strange brainwashing where they feel like they need to be in, that he somehow had power and lost it, which I read in the book.
It's exactly what Lyndon Johnson said. He was talking about the Republicans, and he said, if you tell the lowest white man that he is better than the highest black man, he will let you pick his pocket all day long. And that's exactly what Donald Trump was saying last night, and that's exactly what's going on. You're spot on. Lyndon Johnson, God rest him, nailed it. Thank you very much for the call, David. Is it Azali or Azali? I'm not sure how to pronounce your name in Villa Park, Illinois. Azali. Yes. Hey, what's up?
Oh, okay. I watched that debate last night, if you can call it a debate, and I have decided I am not going to watch any more of that because I already know what is going to be happening. And I would hope that a lot of people send a message by not participating that way, but participating in the way that we know is going to help the right people be elected by, making calls and giving them money, things like that, and also to know what the candidates intend to do. All we have to do is watch the news and watch, when they go out and speak. We don't need to watch that like that because that messes up your mind. It's really disgusting. And you know what? I have said to myself a long time ago, Fox News, and I mean they're not the only one, but the conservative media, they are brainwashing the people. And that's what is really happening. I'm 88 years old, and I know that because, I've lived that long to see it. If there was no Fox News, we would not be in this situation. People they don't know they are being brainwashed. They listen to this, and it's just about all of it is not true. And truth makes you free.
Yeah, I'm with you, Azali. We tuned into Fox News last night and this morning, and last night they were a little, what was this? This morning it's all, Trump won the thing and everything's wonderful and, et cetera. It's amazing. Azali, thank you very much for the call. It's great to hear from you. It's 45 minutes past the hour. We're kind of processing this. In the next hour, Congressman Mark Pocan will be with us for the hour taking your calls.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. 45 minutes past the hour. Talk media for the sane left among us.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are CarShield, America's #1 auto protection company. More information at carshield.com, code TOM. CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. Bowl and Branch Sheets, crafted for the common good. More info at bowl, B-O-L-L, and branch.com, code TOM. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom. And TEEF, T-E-E-F, Smarter Pet Dental Health. For more information, teefhealth.com, code TOM.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Health Justice Now, Single Payer and What Comes Next by Timothy Faust. And this is from the introduction. A secret scream rings through America. It rings down the sterile fluorescent hallways of our hospitals. It rings over our rural towns and our native reservations. It rings through our prisons, the bellies of our great cities. It rings in our farms, in our fields, our streets, and our sewers, our bodies, and our blood. And we are cursed to never hear it clearly until, at last, we realize it has been our own mouth screaming and we are lost. A child born today inherits, in that secret, a new American squalor, the skeletal remains of the American cities, the bleached bones of the American suburbs. This secret is a birthright of continual exploitation, pumped for labor and drained of cash and then punished for the resulting suffering. Punished for being hungry, punished for being sick, punished for being pregnant, punished for being poor, punished for being black or brown, punished for being queer, for being unlucky, for being. At the base of that suffering is lodged a little truth, like a knot in the stomach. In America, sickness makes you poor, and poorness makes you sick. This is a book about that relationship and why it happens, and why it's unnecessary, and what we can do to fix it. The cosmic whirling of God's great slot machine has not determined that some people are fated to suffer while others flourish. We have the resources to take care of everyone, and yet we refuse to do so. Your medical debt and medical bills are unnecessary, but we have chosen to make them necessary. These are structural problems with structural causes, and many of them share roots in how we pay for health care. This is a book about health care and health finance. They are different. Healthcare is anything that helps you stay safe and healthy. It's a kind of freedom from and within your own body. Health finance is the method by which we as a country pay for that freedom and by which we decide who gets to have it and who doesn't. Healthcare is more than what happens to you in the hospital. Healthcare is whether your home makes you sick, or your food makes you sick, or your environment makes you sick, or whether you have enough money to afford the things that keep you healthy. In America, the structure of corporate health care has convinced us that some people deserve health care and some people don't. This is a book about that corporate health finance, about private insurance and private insurers. For half a century, they've convinced us that they're the only things that keep us or could ever keep us from the utter financial ruination of illness. They've sold us different inadequate insurance plans and persuaded us that this is a form of great liberty, while chipping away at our freedoms for profit and holding our bodies and our children's bodies hostage. This is a book about single-payer healthcare, a health finance model in which we pool our abundant collective resources to provide healthcare to all people. It is a common model across the world. As we will discuss in this book, we have the potential not just to enact a single-payer program in America, but to build the greatest healthcare program among any so-called developed democracy. Here is my profession of faith. I believe beyond any doubt that single-payer is demonstrably sound and imminently feasible. I believe a properly ambitious and well-structured single-payer program will do more than any other American social program of this generation to soothe the burns, to resuscitate the spirit, to nourish the moral will of the American people. I believe it will loosen the loathsome manacles of American health finance, an exploitative institution that profits by plundering from us our own bodily autonomy, and that anchors a larger exploitation that holds those whom we love as captive leverage to guarantee our servitude to abusive employers or domestic partners, to those who seek to dominate us both in the office and in the hospital. I believe this nation owes its people, whose labor has created its rich banquet, the safety and agency of healthcare. I believe this healthcare is greater in scope than that which happens upon an operating table. I believe that housing, food, income, and more, the components of basic human dignity, are healthcare. And I believe our work is that of striving toward justice for all people. And I therefore believe, I have to believe, that single-payer healthcare is our moral
that experience
imperative.
again. Rick in Denver. Hey, Rick, what's up?
Howdy. I have a couple quick questions or a couple quick comments. And the first one I would like to make is that last night, after Trump had said that he didn't want to accept the election results if he lost, and that this white supremacist donut stuffed knuckleheads should just stand by, I think that puts him squarely in the category of being guilty of conspiracy. And if it leads to violence, then he's guilty of sedition.
Wow. It's already led to violence, but yeah, I get it. Yeah. And I would imagine that if we had a Democratic president and there was a black group that he was cheering on that was committing violence against people, that the Republicans right now would be trying to charge that president with sedition and impeach that president. And I just look at it. So anyhow, yeah, spot on, Rick. Thank you. John in Kansas City, Missouri. Hey, John, what's up?
Hello, Tom, and I really appreciate you taking my call. I'm doing this as a follow-up from a feeling that I had, but I've been feeling this about the Trump administration for a long time. But his calling out the white supremacists last night kind of validated what I've been feeling, and not just me, but a lot of other black Americans about this. And because of our history here, we can't take these things as an idle threat, because it's been perpetrated upon us before. And like I said, I've never been a gun owner, but in this age of Trump, I just got my first gun to protect my home and property yesterday. Okay? So it's kind of hard. I understand how you feel about not trying to cause insurrection, but I'm looking at this more as a self-defense measure.
I totally understand.
Too many incidents. I mean, we've had too many incidents, and I'm going to tell you one that just happened in Mississippi. 2 18-year-olds riding their ATVs, and 2 white guys, they're in jail now, who were literally shooting at them, chasing them down with a truck. And this is happening
because they were black.
Too much. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and in fact, instead of calling these guys white supremacists, we should be calling them racist terrorists, because that's what they are.
Exactly.
The Klan is the oldest terror organization in the United States, and most of these white supremacist groups are basically spin-offs from the Klan.
Yes, and that's my fear. I used to vote in Washington State, used to live there, so I didn't have to stand in line. But now I'm here in Kansas City, and they're already doing this voter intimidation here in Missouri with these guys coming up to the voting places with their guns like they did in Virginia. And this is what I'm talking about. I'm not going out to attack anyone, but as Black Americans, with our history in this country, when we didn't defend ourselves, we got ran over.
Yeah. Well, John, be sure to get a gun lock and be careful. I mean, bringing a gun into a home increases by 500% the odds that somebody will accidentally die or commit suicide in that house. So, you got to be careful. But I get it. I totally get it. And, sadly, and there's a lot of concern out there, and Trump is making it worse. And, I would never advise anybody to arm themselves. But, I can't tell you that you're making a mistake. I just, it's, which is, I never thought in my whole entire life that I would even be thinking like that. But I totally get it. Yeah. And go ahead, John.
I mean, honestly, it saddens me that I had to go purchase that weapon. Like I said, I'm a former military, hadn't had one for 40 years, and really had no intention of getting one. But until this era, it's sort of like I look at the history of my people, and we have to defend ourselves, pretty much.
Yeah, I get it. John, thank you for the call. I totally get it. Thanks for listening to SiriusXM. Up next, Congressman Mark Pocan will be with us for the full hour, taking your calls. So stick around. We'll hear what the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus has to say about all this.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are CarShield, America's #1 auto protection company. More information at carshield.com, code TOM. CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. Boll and Branch Sheets, crafted for the common good. More info at Boll, B-O-L-L, and branch.com, code TOM. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom. And TEEF, T-E-E-F, Smarter Pet Dental Health. For more information, teefhealth.com, code TOM.
We say fight back!
For our Thom Hartmann Book Club excerpt today, we're reading from Ed Morales' new book, Fantasy Island, Colonialism, Exploitation, and the Betrayal of Puerto Rico. This is from the first chapter. There was never any doubt that the United States wanted Puerto Rico for its own when it began a war with Spain near the turn of the 20th century. Cuba had been in the throes of independence war with Spain off and on since 1868, and the conflict that began in 1895 seemed ripe for the United States to capitalize on. The sinking of the USS Maine, an American naval ship destroyed by an explosion while moored just outside Havana, fueled American entry into the war. Although there are conflicting theories about the source of the explosion, including the likelihood it was caused by a spontaneous internal fire, William Randolph Hearst's newspaper chain blew up the incident into the perfect catalyst for the United States to enter the conflict. When Theodore Roosevelt entered the fray with his army of Rough Riders, the whole affair came as no surprise to anyone who'd been paying attention to the lust U.S. government leaders and military had long expressed to expand southward and westward. And although the idea of manifest destiny was at the forefront of the political discourse of this period, it's less often observed that the United States' expansionist gaze was saturated with racial language and attitudes, at once desirous of and repelled by Latin America's mestizo mulatto social dynamic. The Haitian Revolution at the end of the 19th century and into the 20th created a U.S. obsession with both Cuba and Puerto Rico because of the potential of a similar black-led revolt on those islands. In 1826, Virginia Senator John Randolph feared that such a revolt would render the southern United States vulnerable to invasion from Cubans in rowboats. For this reason, he objected to the United States participating in the 1826 Panama Congress because American diplomats would have to endure the horror of a U.S. diplomat taking his seat in the Congress, quote, beside the native African, their American descendants, the mixed breeds, the Indians, and the half-breeds, without any offense or scandal at so motley a mixture, end quote. The logic driving this perspective underlined not only the importance of slavery to the emergence of capitalism in the 19th century, but also, as Matthew Karp points out in this vast southern empire, the extent to which slave owners and their elected representatives disproportionately shaped U.S. foreign policy. Going back as far as the Haitian Revolution, fear of a successful slave rebellion in the newly formed United States strongly motivated Southern politicians. As Karp mentions, to that end, Presidents Madison and Monroe, quote, used overwhelming force to destroy black maroon settlements in southern Florida, end quote. Fear of slave rebellions also briefly united the interests of American slaveholders and Cuban elites who wanted independence from Spain, but in the late 19th century, after abolition, Roosevelt's forces fought in conjunction with Afro-Cuban armies against their common Spanish foe. The move to wrest Cuba and Puerto Rico from Spain came just as Spain had finally relented to end slavery as a concession to black rebel Cuban armies that had formed to push for independence. In a further move to placate continued unrest on the island, in November 1897, Spain signed automatic charters for Cuba and Puerto Rico, which gave limited home rule governments to both islands. Puerto Rico would gain full representation in the Cortes, the Spanish parliament, and could veto Spanish commercial treaties unfavorable to them while also retaining the rights to set tariffs on imports and exports. In this way, Puerto Ricans were granted a kind of citizenship that allowed self-government, grafted on what was left of their Spanish subjecthood. Yet on July 25, 1898, 8 days after the first meeting of the newly formed Puerto Rican Parliament, U.S. troops arrived in the southern port of Guanica and replaced the Spanish flag with the stars and stripes. This date would be remembered over 50 years later when the United States finally followed through on a project to allow Puerto Ricans to have limited autonomy and self-government. But at the time, it was both the end of Teddy Roosevelt's splendid little war and the beginning of the current quandary over what exactly Puerto Rico's new colonial master would do with the island. Although historians agree that there was no pre-existing plan for designating Puerto Rico's status, there was a general belief that Puerto Rico could be incorporated as a U.S. territory and probably would be. This led many to assume that it would follow a similar path to statehood as former territories like Florida and Louisiana. At the very least, it would, by acceding to military control, receive, quote, the advantages and blessings of enlightened civilization, end quote, as Puerto Rico's first military governor, Nelson A. Miles, declared 3 days after the landing of Guanica. Because Cuba was so militarized during its wars for independence, the United States decided to allow it national sovereignty, thinking it could still exert considerable control over the economy because of existing business interests and a ready-made set of Cuban consumers who were already buying Ford Model Ts. But although Puerto Rico had experienced anti-Spanish uprisings in the mid-19th century, in 1898 they did not have nearly the same level of armed mobilization present. So the United States held on to it, particularly because of its geographic location, which would provide the United States with a stronghold on the easternmost tip of the Caribbean. The book is Fantasy Island by Ed Morales.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the second hour of the Thom Hartmann Program. Middays with Mark has been moved back an hour to this hour. Congressman Mark Pocan, the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the guy who represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin in the U.S. House of Representatives, pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan is on the line with us. And for the next hour, we'll be taking your calls at 202-808-9925. Congressman Pocan, I don't know if you've heard any of my rants or anything, but my sense of last night is that Donald Trump was not running against Joe Biden. He's running against democracy. He's running against our political system, against the idea of a constitutionally limited representative democratic republic. I'm curious your take on last night.
Yeah, I agree with you. I felt like he was running against the election, and he also behaved much like that kind of big, slow kid in elementary school who hits people when he doesn't know the answers. Donald Trump was doing a lot of that behavior, and I think he was trying to, get Joe Biden to take the bait more. And in general, I thought Joe Biden did a great job in answering the questions. And I think that Donald Trump didn't accomplish what I think he went into the debate trying to do.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else you want to point out before we pick up phone calls?
No, I think that's the biggest thing everyone's talking about right now. We're down to less than 5 weeks to the election, and we're hoping to get a COVID bill through Congress. We're going to pass one out of the House, I think, this week again, a slightly scaled back one, trying to bring the Republicans to the table. But it's pretty amazing that they're not taking the same interest that we are.
Yeah, I'm with you. Alex in Atlanta, Georgia, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, gentlemen, thank you for taking the call. I'm from Atlanta, and I follow politics pretty much since I graduated high school. I'm about 37 right now. And my primary question I would really like to present to our congressman would be with Mr. Trump. Donald Trump is consistently challenging the results of the election. It almost seems inevitable that in the event Mr. Biden, who I'm praying wins, what are we prepared to do? Is this something that our representatives are prepared to embrace on that day, on November the 9th, when the day after the election, if he wants to throw everything under the sun? Because based on everything I can see, regardless of what I'm watching, it looks like that's where we're going with this whole thing.
Yeah, November 4th. Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Alex.
Well, Alex, I think we've discussed in some previous weeks that there is a table of folks, major national groups working on this, including people at the CPC, Congressional Progressive Caucus level. They're ready for a number of different scenarios. Some of the best legal minds are there. However, I really think Donald Trump is really setting this up like a backup. Like he's hoping it's a close election and then he might be able to pull out winning without winning. But right now, I don't know if that's happening for him. When I look at the polling around the country in places like Wisconsin that are key states, and I look at the polling after the debate last night, 2-1, people thought Joe Biden won. I don't see Donald Trump doing anything to expand his electorate. And he can huff and he can puff and he can say all sorts of stupid and racist things, but it's not going to put him any closer to winning the White House. In fact, just the opposite. So there are plenty of people ready, well prepared for a number of scenarios should they happen. But the best thing that we can all do is get people out to vote, vote early, vote absentee, and make sure that everyone we know who's not supporting Donald Trump gets out to vote and win big in as many states as possible. And then that backup scenario he's working on will never, ever be a reality.
Jessica in Chicago, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, gentlemen. I have a question. In 2016, the election, there were only 8 justices on the Supreme Court. Why should the Democratic senators let the Supreme Court proceed when it is not even safe? We have coronavirus. The Republicans do not respect that. They should say they are not safe to be in those hearings or those votes.
Yeah, Jessica, they're going to say a lot of things. We had Chuck Schumer on a call about an hour ago, and they are working on everything they can possibly do to make sure that we live by what the people want. The people want us to wait until we have a new president. That's by every poll out there, and that's why we have elections. And they're going to do everything they can. However, there are some limitations. You know, even one of the scenarios that's been out there, which is we could start an impeachment process, would stop everything. That's only if Mitch McConnell decides to convene the session in a certain way, and he can convene it in a different way and get around that. So they're working on everything possible to slow down the process, to try to make sure public opinion is strong enough that it's not a good idea for them to do this, especially before the election. But we just have to reach out to our Republican senators, if you're in a state that has a Republican senator, and really express this and work with any group in your local area that's working on this. It's going to take a lot of people pressure to stop them from doing what they're most likely to try to do. We need 2 more Republican senators. That's what Chuck Schumer reminded us again today. That's really the game. We need to get 2 more Republican senators to say they won't support justice until there's a new president elected.
Michael in Bronx, New York. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Greetings, gentlemen. How you doing? And I heard your commentary about yesterday's debates. And major question that I have and concern. First of all, I don't like how it went down yesterday when Trump kept talking over Biden and then had to go to talk over the moderator. I really think that they need to, what's the word I'm looking for, vet these moderators ahead of time, because Chris Wallace did a horrible job in controlling everything. I mean, if I was moderator, I would make sure that Trump did not do what he did. I don't know if moderators have the right to cut off the microphone or just simply disqualify the person for not adhering to the rules that they both agreed to. I mean, do you think there needs to be a reform like that?
Yeah, Michael, I think if Chris Wallace had the ability to turn off the mic, he would have yesterday, and I think that is exactly the way to go forward. If you're going to have a president who's a schoolyard bully and about as mature as a schoolyard bully doing what he's doing, you're going to have something so you can have a debate that looks like it should in the greatest country in the world. And it was embarrassing last night. I'm sure people around the world were looking at the American people going, how did you ever elect this person to be president? And that behavior was ridiculous. So, I actually give Chris Wallace a little bit of latitude in that if he had a button and could have muted him, that would be another thing. But how else do you stop a blowhard whose whole intent was to come in there and try to rile Joe Biden? Didn't accomplish it, but he just bloviated over and over and over and made it a very unfunctional debate. So I agree Chris Wallace could have done more, but I think what he really needed, and I agree moving forward, we should hopefully be advocating for ways to silence a mic if someone's not going to follow the rules.
Congressman, we just have 40 seconds to the break. I pretty much quit drinking a few months ago, but last night I had to open a bottle of wine. I couldn't deal with it. I have no stomach to watch any more of these things, frankly. I mean, I'll do it because it's my job, but I'm hearing from my callers who are saying, I have no interest in watching another one of these. All that did was give me bad dreams. Do you think that the next 2 debates, not the Pence debate, I think that'll be probably quite reasonable, but the next 2 debates should be called off?
I think Donald Trump is trying to make Joe Biden ask for them to get called off. That's just my personal opinion. I think he made it so awful that then he can blame Joe Biden, doesn't want to debate him, performance drugs, all the blah, blah, blah that Donald Trump says. So, I think we just need to do things like cutting off mics.
Yeah, I'm with you. Congressman Mark Pocan, the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the Big Cheese Progressive in Washington, D.C., is on the line with us for the hour, taking your calls. It's Hour 2, Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann Program. Pocan, POCAN.house.gov is his website. You can tweet him at Rep, as in Representative Rep Mark Pocan.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And we will be back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan in just a moment. And welcome back. Dan in Sherman Oaks, California. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan. No Dan. Okay. Steve in New Boston, Michigan. Steve, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, hello, Congressman, and hello, Tom. I'm calling in regards to the comment that Donald Trump had made in the 2016 election debating with Hillary Clinton, saying that I don't pay any taxes, it makes me smart. 50% of the people don't pay taxes in this country. And being that that's out, and Donald Trump threw all the rich people under the bus, what will Congress do to now investigate all these other rich people who seem to have taken advantage of our tax codes and are not paying their fair share? That's my question. What are we going to do? There's a lot of money out there. We need it.
Steve, I think you bring a terrific point up. Donald Trump may have just made a lot of people at Mar-a-Lago less rich because he's exposing to the public about how much the tax code doesn't work for most people. Working people, by and large, don't have the same amount of exemptions, and some of them even got rolled back when we gave the giant $2 trillion tax cut to the wealthiest a couple of years ago that Donald Trump did. He actually took away some of the tax breaks that the middle class actually benefited from. So I think, this exposure might be very helpful for those of us who want to see corporate taxes and the highest wealth earners have higher rates again, and make sure that, as Joe Biden said, anyone making over $400,000 is going to pay more in taxes. But, some of these specialty tax cuts that they have, especially if we can highlight, might be very useful. And I think the American people would be very supportive of changing the tax code.
John in Seattle, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, Congressman. Hey, Ron Johnson is a blight on America, not just on Wisconsin. Are you doing anything? Would you be willing to challenge him or help find somebody? I mean, Russ Feingold was one of the greatest senators this country's ever born, and yet a guy like him, I mean, come on, somebody's got to beat him. Will you, or will you find somebody to knock this guy off in 2 years?
The good news, John, is there are many people looking at running against Ron Johnson, many good people that I think can beat Ron Johnson. You're right. We kind of call it going full Rojo is what we refer to when he does what he's doing lately. The hearings on Hunter Biden rather than on what's happening in ICE facilities, his flip-flop on whether or not we should approve a Supreme Court justice. And I forgot the most recent thing he did, but it was really dumb, even by Donald Trump standards, dumb. And we understand that we have got a real opportunity to take him out in 2022 with a number of good, talented people. In 2018, we elected a number of younger statewide elected officials. We have some smart local elected officials. There's going to be a Democratic primary with more than one really good candidate, and I think Ron Johnson's going to have a very difficult time in 2022, especially if Joe Biden does an infrastructure package and solves COVID with getting vaccines out quickly in 2021. All of those things will work very good for us.
Wow, I would donate to that, any campaign, because he's funneling Russian propaganda right into the Senate.
He's a total sycophant for Donald Trump because he truly was a cult follower before there was a cult of Donald Trump. That's the problem.
That's amazing. Congressman Mark Pocan with us, taking your calls for the hour. It's Middays with Mark, Hour 2 edition today. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a minute. The Hartmann Report is a free daily podcast 7 days a week, and you can find our entire 3-hour podcast over at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. John in Austin, Texas. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
How are you, sir? I've run a restaurant. I've owned a restaurant for 15 and a half years, and we applied for the PPP and the disaster loan. Now, we've had to close our doors on the 20th, last week, after 15 and a half years. Is there any legislation on the horizon to help companies like mine? Because we didn't use that money to grow our business, to expand our business, to improve our business. We just used this to survive. And it's only put us in debt, further debt. So is there any legislation or possibility of any legislation to help relieve those loans from people like me who've done the right thing and this virus just took us down? I'd like to know the answer to that question.
Yeah, John, first of all, I'm sorry to hear about your situation. Tom and I often, one of the things I think we've bonded on early on is we both have been small business owners. I've had a specialty printing business for 33 years now, and I know exactly what you're saying. I saw a recent survey that said 35% of restaurants could close in the next 60 days in this country because of what's going on. The bill that we likely are going to pass out of the House not only has an extension of the PPP loans, including a second hit for people who really need it, as well as an expanded employee retention tax credit, but specific provisions, and it's about $100 billion worth for restaurants, because it's restaurants and bars, the meeting industry and tourism, I think, that are hit the hardest, and then many other industries that feed them are hit, but maybe not as directly. So we are trying to address it in the bill that the Democrats put forward this week. It's front and center in that bill, but I hear you. I feel for you because, after 15 years, you've hit all the normal targets that a small business needs to know if they're going to be solvent, and COVID, unfortunately, is not normal and taking a lot of people out, and I'm sorry to hear that.
Paul in Taos, New Mexico. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, Congressman, thank you so much. I want to applaud Joe Biden for directly looking in the lens and talking to the American people. The only time Donald Trump did that was to talk to militia and the Proud Boys and white supremacists. That's the only time he spoke to the American people, was them. So my question to you, is there any chance that the House of Representatives can censure him as behaving as the commander-in-chief of white supremacists?
And let's call them racist terrorists, by the way. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just see that as unlikely, Paul. I mean, one, it's too close to an election. People would see it as political. Two, we're done this week until after the election. And our main goal right now is to get the COVID bill done. And we're working very hard to try to do that. So I totally understand. I don't know if, based on a debate performance, you can censure a president anyway. But I think the American people are censuring him. By what I saw, the exit poll surveys from last night where 60% thought Joe Biden won, 28% thought Donald Trump. That's a 2-to-1 ratio. So clearly 28% of people are going to be with him even if he goes out there in a full white hood and robes. That's the group that really likes him for who he is. But I don't think it brought him any new voters.
Bill in Union Pier, Michigan. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, gentlemen. Thank you for your service. Your comment on the theory that Trump never anticipated being president. He really was not, it was not in his game plan. His motivation for running in the Republican primary was to get free media exposure, more spreading of the Trump name and his brand in the mass media. He wanted to piggy bank his success with The Apprentice and launch a talk show or even channel in the vein of, or a channel in the vein of Fox. He made real money for the first time in his life with The Apprentice, and it was using the primary as a launching point. No intention of winning, but unfortunately it fell in his lap. What is your comment on that? That theory has been bouncing around a while.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to it. I mean, he kind of rose out of this free media opportunity with that giant slew of Republican candidates they had going into 16. And, he never was prepared to be president, and he's still not ready to be president, even almost 4 years into his term. So I do think, though, and I really believe this very strongly, that he is already working towards his next gig, so to speak. And I think when he praises that OAN network and he kind of goes after Fox a little bit, he's trying to see where he can get a better deal, because I think he's going to try to then go into that kind of media and just bloviate to all the racists and others that seems to have followed his presidency, and that's his next way of trying to make money. So again, it's kind of the same reason he ran in the first place. He'll be leaving doing, but I think I'm watching him set this up, and if he gets a good enough deal from Fox, he'll have Fox. If not, he's got OAN as a backup, but he is going to maybe even start his own network, but I think that's the path he's looking at.
We have just a minute to the break. Tom in St. Louis, Missouri. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Congressman. I'd like to know your thoughts on
how Mitch McConnell can continue to get away with paralyzing the United States Senate by not bringing bills to the floor. And is there anything we can do in the future to change this and turn it into a legislative body again?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest thing is you get rid of Mitch McConnell, right? Because he's been more than willing to do nothing and doesn't have a problem with that. But secondly, it's part of his caucus. You know, that first time he put out a COVID bill that had money for F-35s and double tax exemptions for 2 martini lunches and all this crazy stuff thrown into a COVID bill, he couldn't even get the votes out of his own caucus to advance that, which is why he never took a vote on that initially when they were trying to negotiate. So part of it is just the Republican Party is a mix now of Tea Party folks and cult followers, with any moderate or true conservative almost pushed out. That's why Mitt Romney suddenly looks reasonable, and yet he's a pretty mainstream conservative. But in the Republican Party these days, that's an anomaly.
Yeah, sadly. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour. He is the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the big cheese progressive in Washington, D.C., representing the state of Wisconsin, no coincidence, and in the 2nd District. Pocan, POCAN.house.gov is his website. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. We'll be back with more of your calls for the Congressman in just a moment.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's the place where smart people get their news. The Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back with your calls for Congressman Pocan.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Under the Influence, Putting Peer Pressure to Work by Robert H. Frank. And I'm reading from the prologue. That we are more closely connected to one another than most of us realize is an old idea. An important variation dates from 1929, when Hungarian writer Frigyes Karinthy published a short story entitled Chains. 2 of the story's main characters speculate that any 2 living people can be connected by a chain involving no more than 5 acquaintances. That some such chains exist is hardly surprising, since most of us can think of people in distant locations to whom we're connected through a small number of intermediaries. The man bites dog aspect of Karinthy's conjecture is that almost any 2 people, A and E, could be linked by a chain like A knows B, B knows C, C knows D, who knows E. One of the first systematic attempts to test this claim came in the 1960s with a series of experiments by the psychologist Stanley Milgram. In it, he sent packages containing a small booklet to 96 people chosen at random from the Omaha, Nebraska telephone directory. His cover letter asked them to try to forward the booklet to a specific residence of Boston, Massachusetts, through a chain of personal acquaintances. He told them the name and address of the Boston resident, that he worked as a stockbroker, and that the first person in their chain should be somebody they knew on a first-name basis. Milgram also advised them to choose someone they believed, presumably based on the target's location and occupation, could be socially closer to the target than they were themselves. Subsequent recipients in the chain were asked to forward the same instructions. Many of the Omaha recipients undoubtedly tossed Milgram's booklet in the trash, so it's remarkable that the Boston target received 18 of the 96 packages. The average number of links in the 18 chains was 5.9. But the now familiar expression 6 degrees of separation would not gain broad currency until many years later, when John Guare's play by that name premiered on Broadway in 1990. The concept became a meme in full when 4 Albright College students introduced 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon in 1994, a game designed to measure the professional proximity of an actor, living or dead, to the American film star Kevin Bacon. An actor has a Bacon number of 1, for example, if he or she appeared in the same film with Bacon. Someone who appeared in a film with another actor who appeared in a film with Bacon has a Bacon number of 2, and so on. The average Bacon number is 2.95 among actors who have one. In that group, even the actor most distant from Bacon, William Rufus Shafter, has a Bacon number of only 7. Shafter, a Union Army officer during the Civil War, appeared in 2 films in 1898. For academics who study social connectedness, the 6 degrees concept gained little traction until 1998. That's when the sociologist Duncan Watts and the mathematician Steve Straga published their landmark paper, Collective Dynamics of Small World Networks in Nature. In the years since then, this paper has provided the mathematical foundation for the analytical tools that social scientists have been using with such remarkable success to study how ideas and behaviors spread through populations like infectious diseases. It has already been cited by other scholars more than 38,000 times and is one of the few papers ever published to be among the most widely cited works in multiple disciplines. In his 1976 book, The Selfish Gene, the evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins coined the term meme, which Webster now defines as an idea, behavior, style, or usage that spreads from person to person within a culture. The meme is to cultural transmission, Dawkins argued, as the gene is to biological transmission. One of Charles Darwin's central insights was that natural selection favors genetic variations that enhance the individual organism's ability to survive and reproduce. Much of the time, the same variations also benefit larger groups, but often not. For example, an inclination to cheat when no one's looking might benefit individuals, but widespread cheating almost always makes matters worse for groups. It is the same with memes. The memes that propagate most successfully are often ones that benefit both individuals and groups. But here too, not always. As the legal scholar Jeffrey Stake has argued, ideas should not be treated as inert products, but as living things that sometimes exert some influence over their environment. Some of the ideas are more adept at surviving than others, and the ones that survive will not necessarily be good for humans. It is often hard to evaluate whether a specific behavior even qualifies as a meme, and if so, whether its consequences on balance are positive or negative. Yet sometimes the evidence is clear. We know, for example, that the strongest predictor of whether people will take up smoking is the proportion of their close friends who smoke. Smoking is thus clearly a meme. The negative health consequences of smoking are also conclusively documented, and most smokers themselves express regret over having started. By definition, then, smoking unambiguously qualifies as a socially destructive meme. On the other side of the ledger, we have compelling evidence that the adoption of photovoltaic solar panels is both socially contagious and almost uniformly positive in terms of environmental consequences. Accordingly, few would object to calling the practice a socially beneficial meme. Adam Smith, widely considered the father of economics, is often cited in defense of the claim that competitive markets produce the greatest good for the greatest number. The book is
Why is it that almost a third
So there's a new paper out from Breakthrough, the National Center for Climate Restoration in Australia. This is one of these papers that, companies buy these things, governments buy them from these think tanks. This is done by a bunch of military experts. One of these guys actually was also the chairman of the Australian Coal Association and chief executive of the Australian Institute of Company Directors. The bottom line, and I'll just get to it real quick, even for 2 degrees Celsius warming, more than 1 billion people may need to be relocated. And in high-end scenarios, the scale of destruction is beyond.
Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour, middays with Mark, second hour edition here on the Thom Hartmann Program. And Sarah in Oxford, Ohio, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, I just have a concern about the envelopes. Ever since Friday, Chris Hayes' 9 ballots, that episode, the 9 ballots in Pennsylvania. But if you listen closely, you can kind of get a picture that the envelopes for the applications are identical, to the ballot envelopes. So if both of those envelopes are identical, could you imagine the chaos it's going to cause? And they can totally claim innocence to it in the end, like, oh, we didn't realize they're the same.
Yeah,
so that's my concern with the envelope.
Okay.
Yeah, that's, I think, a specific state's envelope. I just don't know enough, Sarah, to respond to that, other than, I know in every state people are messaging their state's rules because it is different rules in every state around those absentee ballots. So it's not necessarily a national concern as long as I think there's only, if I remember, I think it's Pennsylvania is the only state that's kind of doing something like this. I could be wrong if there's a state that's not as swingable that is. But in places like Wisconsin, it's pretty clear, and I think most states have a pretty good system.
Kylie in Marietta, Georgia. Or no, Marietta, California. I'm sorry. Kylie, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, thank you very much. My comment is on how the Senate is pushing through another justice, and the Democrats seem to have their hands tied. They don't seem to be able to do anything about it, and they're saying that the American citizens should have a voice in choosing the next Senate. I'm wondering, can the Congress set up a site, or can somebody set up a website like GoFundMe and have people petition and sign up and somehow have a voice before the election? I don't want to flood the mailing or the post office, but can we have a website that everyone can just sign up and show Mitch McConnell, show the Senate that we are determined. We don't want them choosing another justice before the election. It seems like, I don't know what else we can do, because it seems like they've set it up so that no matter what, they will push through Trump.
Yeah, Kylie, the single easiest way, and by easy I do not mean easy, but the single best way, maybe is the better word, to stop this is to find 2 more Republican senators who won't move forward. So that means if you live in a state with a Republican senator or senators, you need to call and reach out and make your voices heard. I don't think a national petition is going to sway Mitch McConnell, who's sitting on hundreds of bills and doesn't done much in Congress. I don't think he really cares. Mitch McConnell is going to continue being Mitch McConnell. But who will care are his individual members, and if they hear it from their constituents, that is the best way to find those 2 more Republican senators. Trust me, talking to Chuck Schumer, they're doing everything they can on this process, but the most sure way to defeat having a nomination of another Supreme Court judge is to find 2 more Republican senators to do the right thing, and that means people power. People have to call their senators.
And the number for the Senate switchboard is 202-225-3121 or 224-3121. Either one will get you there. Craig in Albuquerque, New Mexico. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, I just want to say that Trump is a snollygoster. And I also wonder if we'll reach the Nixon point where the Republicans will go and tell him either to resign or end his candidacy or some other option. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the difference between this and Nixon, with me anyway, in my opinion, is that Donald Trump has really made this like a cult, right? The Republican Party is a cult these days, not a conservative political party. And so there's so much loyalty to Donald Trump for largely his racism, right? That's the number one attraction to him by his supporters, that too many Republicans are afraid to take him on to upset that base. So Donald Trump has achieved somewhat of a cult-like status, and that's why I think it's harder than what you saw when the situation occurred with President Nixon. So the best thing we can do is do everything we can to get people who think like us out to vote and defeat him in as many places that all of his backup plans he's trying to throw against the wall right now, none of them will stick because he will have lost in enough places outright on Election Day.
Brian in Lake Worth, Florida. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, good afternoon, Congressman. Thanks for taking my call. I have something of grave concern and something of the utmost urgency, and I don't say that lightly, and it could also be Donald Trump's kryptonite. That is, I don't understand why, ever since we've learned about the finances of Donald Trump and how much money he owes, and we do not know who he owes it to. I believe that that man needs to be immediately stripped of his presidential powers. And so this is something Homeland Security should do. And act as if he just had a stroke and just set him aside, swear in Pence as the vice president until we can get this straightened out. He cannot sit in the Oval Office with that hanging over his head. He's too much of a risk to this nation, and that has to happen. As far as I'm concerned, it should have happened Monday. Thank you.
Yeah, Brian, I mean, if we were trying to give out security clearances to people with really high debt would be able to get them. But Donald Trump got elected, unfortunately, by the Electoral College in 2016, and there's not much you can do just because he has debt. Now, having said that, I think a lot of people could look at him now and wonder if his whole presidency has been about boosting himself and trying to profit and get himself out of the hole, that he's got to pay a whole lot of loans in a very short amount of time, and what else is he selling out in order to take care of himself personally, because this whole presidency has been about taking care of his family and his businesses. But I don't know if there's anything directly you can see government do because he has debt, because he got elected. But it is ironic that he never would have gotten security clearance as a federal employee with that kind of a debt. I'm quite sure of that.
Nick in Chicago, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you very much. Just a quick suggestion for future debates before my question. I'm wondering, like the Oscars and your hard breaks, why not fade in music when time is up and maybe incorporate a mechanism that automatically cuts off the mic so that, that bloviating spewer doesn't stop his barbaric yapping. You could blow a foghorn, but it wouldn't allow them to continue. But anyway, my question is about an October surprise. Since we know that Trump is a psychopath he'll stop at nothing to remain in office, especially since he's facing prison, what could possibly be bigger and more shocking and traumatic than 9/11 or initiating or provoking a nuclear war? They've established a so-called Space Force. There's been a lot of credible reporting by military pilots' radar and ground tracking facilities and such. What is the Democratic Party going to do when Trump plays the UFO threat card and claims there's an impending attack by malevolent space aliens?
Or more practically, perhaps. Forgive me. But, back in 2012, he tweeted that any minute now, Barack Obama is going to start a war with Iran in order to get himself reelected. He clearly thinks that way. Let me make this a little less. Anyhow, to you, sir. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I like Nick's other suggestion about the music being the fade out, nice and loud music so you can't hear the person. So, Nick, thank you for that, because I think that, or turning off a mic, or at some point a shock collar. I don't know what we're going to do, but we got to do something to make a debate more like a debate. I think what he's trying to set up right now is the idea that he's going to have a vaccine. I mean, he's been signaling this, and Donald Trump is pretty good about signaling things. He's good at repetition because he knows people need repetition. He's I think, an amazing self-promoter, and I think that's what he's setting up right now, is that he's going to somehow say there's a vaccine. The good news is, I talked to Dr. Fauci a couple weeks ago about this. The president can't just do that, even with the FDA. There's several independent panels that must approve anything, that have people like Dr. Fauci and Francis Collins from the NIH are on these special panels. And I think that's where he's going to try to pretend there is, but I think we all know there could be something by the end of the year, and there could be tens of millions of doses in the first quarter and hundreds of millions in the second quarter, but it's nothing before the election. But I think that's what Donald Trump is going to try to spin, that not only did not millions die, only 200,000, as crazy as that argument is, that he has a vaccine.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. We'll be right back. It's 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back with more of your calls for Congressman Mark Pocan, the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, in just a moment. His website, Pocan, POCAN.house.gov. You can tweet him at @RepMarkPocan. Send him a tweet and say hi. Say thank you for dropping by every week and doing this. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls for Congressman Mark Pocan in just a moment. And welcome back. John in Cambria, California. John, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello, Congressman Pocan and Tom. This is a good segue to that last caller's question. Regarding the vaccine, when that was brought up, Donald Trump said that he believes they'll have a vaccine by November 1st, and that he's already worked out logistics to mobilize the military to distribute that vaccine. Now, do you think that was a slip of the tongue, that he really is doing that, but not to distribute the vaccine, but to mobilize the military for what may happen after the election results?
Honestly, I think when Donald Trump's talking, he's lying, right? So you just got to assume it's Donald Trump putting out, all the different messages that he does. I do think, though, that he is trying to signal that he's going to claim there's a vaccine. But there's 6 major drugs that I know of, according to Dr. Fauci, that are in third phase trials, 30 to 60,000 people involved in that. You're not going to have that by November 1st. It's extremely unlikely, and regardless, you wouldn't have distribution till first quarter of next year. So this is Donald Trump just being Donald Trump. I don't think he was signaling anything with the military, and quite honestly, I'm not sure if the military would come to his aid just if he tries to abuse his office. So I think I understand the angst and worry that people have about that. I would take every bit of that angst and worry and channel it into every time he does that to you, find 10 more people to vote against him. And if we all do that, we're not going to have to worry about any other scenario on November 3rd.
Melvin in Columbus, Ohio. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Congressman. I was wondering, Bill Barr has been nothing but a Trump personal attorney instead of an attorney general for the United States. And I was just wondering, why haven't there been any action taken to impeach him? Because there's certainly enough wrongdoing, that to charge against him.
Yeah, I think we're in a final week before an election. Anything done this time of year is going to be seen as electoral, not based on what I agree with you, many solid reasons why Bill Barr has not been the Attorney General for the United States, but he's been Donald Trump's personal attorney. And I really hope that when Donald Trump loses, we still go after the crimes that he and his administration did, because I think it's important for the future of the presidency, for any president of any political party in the future, that they don't do what Donald Trump did. This has been truly unusual by every standard, and I hope that people like Bill Barr have to still pay at the end of the day, even if it's into 2021 or 2022.
We just have 20 seconds. Do you expect that to happen? I mean, are you hearing that from your colleagues?
I think a lot of my colleagues would love to go in that direction. I think the question will be, what does Joe Biden want to do, and how hard will he push it? Because don't forget, he'll now be in charge of the Attorney General's office. But I think if you throw in Hunter Biden one more time and take Biden's name and drag it through the mud, we might have someone who understands the issue like many of us in Congress do.
Yeah, he showed absolutely extraordinary restraint last night. I would have been so tempted to go over and punch him in the face. It's amazing. Congressman Mark Pocan with us, taking your calls for the hour. We'll be right back in just a moment with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan in just a moment. Stick with us. On the science revolution this week, Trump never noticed a modern-day American disaster. He's trying to spread the virus as far and wide as possible. We should call this today what history will call it when it looks back on this moment: genocide. David Kraft with the Nuclear Energy Information Service is here. It's time to end Exelon's nuclear hostage crisis. Climate risks are compounding financial challenges for Midwest nuclear plants. Plus, Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist II of Michigan drops by to explain that racism is a public health crisis. Tune into the Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are available. Welcome back. 10 minutes before the hour. Congressman Mark Pocan with us, taking your calls for the hour. Amy in San Diego, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, guys. Thanks for taking my call. I just wanted to say Donald Trump has said that the only way he can lose is if we cheat. So you guys are saying if we come out in overwhelming numbers, then it's over. I don't think so. Why do you guys think that?
Andy, I truly believe that, because at that point, Republican senators and congresspeople and governors are going to look out for themselves because they'll realize Donald Trump is now yesterday's news. And, you can see from their comments that they've said we will have a peaceful transition of power. I truly believe this is just Donald Trump. And at that point, if we have a big win, you win Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, maybe Georgia, Arizona, Florida, if you start winning like that, it's done. He will have no other option. He'll probably do a bunch of sleazy executive orders to benefit his family between then and January. But other than that, it will be over. So honestly, you can't do anything to stop those other scenarios personally right now, but you can do everything you can to get people out to vote. So I just want to focus everyone on taking any angst or energy or anxiety or anger and put it towards getting people out to vote that will vote against Donald Trump. If we do that, we will be doing the best thing in the next less than 5 weeks we can possibly do.
Carl in Ocala, Florida, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you very much for taking my call. I had a question regarding a concern that's been raised in the news recently about the states, basically red states, their legislatures re-electing an alternate electoral college representation group to go and vote in Trump. I did a little research, and I believe I'm correct in stating that all 50 states have legislatively granted the inalienable right to their representation selection through the process called voting. Is that, in your estimate, pretty challengeable in case we should see that alternative action by some state legislatures?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a very difficult path, and let me give you a number of reasons. And I did a little research on this because we've been asked this a few times, and I think it's a very fair and valid question. First, you have to have your electors done by election day. You do this in October across the country. So it's not like you can do it after the fact. So they would have to signal something before the election, which I don't think we're going to see in states. In the key states that you're most nervous about, many of them, Michigan, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, have Democratic governors that can veto any action. Also, Wisconsin statutes don't allow the legislature to do that, actually. So even though you could say it's a scenario, it's not allowed. They'd have to change the statute first in order to do that. And again, the governor could veto something. Only Arizona and Florida have Republican governors. So you've already taken that number down of states that where it could be manipulated and taken it seriously down. So one, the law says you have to have the electors in place by election day. And two, it just doesn't work quite as simply as it looks like with those Republican majorities. So people are still, trust me, ready for this and other scenarios, but this scenario seems less likely given some of those facts.
Sandra in Omaha, Nebraska, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, guys. I just wondered if when Biden gets in, and I'm going to say when, an awful lot of the people that Trump has put in power has sidestepped Senate approval. Can he just tell all of those people, you're gone, day one, and then fill those positions with a 30-day appointment for somebody and then get the Senate to actually do what they normally should be doing and approving appointments? Or does he have the power to do that?
I think you're going to see an aggressive agenda. If we have the Senate, it's going to depend on how many votes. What are they going to do about the filibuster? I think you've got a few questions that have to be answered first, Sandra, but I do think that many of us who look at the first 6 to 12 months of Barack Obama and look back at what we should have done, I think are ready to make sure we don't make those mistakes in 2021. So I think that many organizations are working around this, and we know it's central is many of the democracy reforms that we need to do that will impact every other issue. So I think rest assured is going to be an aggressive push by many national organizations to make sure we have an agenda. And lastly, if I could just say, Sandra, your state's unique because you break out your electoral college votes, and you also have one of my favorite congressional candidates in the country, Kari Eastman, running. And I hope that everything you could do to help her, as well as you're helping Joe Biden, it's going to be important because I would love to have a good, solid, Democratic, progressive member of Congress from Omaha, Nebraska, and she's a really great person, and it would send a lot of messages nationally when Omaha is sending someone like that to Congress.
Congressman, we just have 45 seconds to the break. Thoughts on this coming week? You said this is the last week Congress is in session. What should we be looking at?
Yeah, the House is the Senate technically is also in. Yeah, the Senate also may be in session next week, although they're thinking they may finish this week, except for, of course, trying to move the Supreme Court justice forward. I talked to Tammy Baldwin on Sunday, and she indicated that is their calendar. Ours is done this week, although we're going to be open at any time to come back to do the COVID bill. So I think that's the things to watch, but really just the election. I think, really we are transitioning to that final month before the election. This is all efforts have to go towards getting out voters. We can't let Donald Trump sidetrack us, can't let him create chaos that diverts us. We can't let him turn anyone off from voting. We've got to be as active as we've ever been in this election.
Amen. Congressman, thanks so much for dropping by today. Great talking with you.
Thank you, Tom, as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll be back. We're going to get into a little bit of science news here, and then back to with Tanya Sanerib, which is about biological diversity, and we're going to continue our conversation about last night's debate. So stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are CarShield, America's #1 auto protection company. More information at carshield.com, code TOM. CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. Boll and Branch Sheets, crafted for the common good. More info at Boll, B-O-L-L, and branch.com, code TOM. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom. And TEEF, T-E-E-F, Smarter Pet Dental Health. For more information, teefhealth.com, code TOM.
We say fight back!
On their own, political actors often ignore the incentives shaping their decisions, and academic researchers miss the human motivations that drive political decision-making. Together, however, they shine bright light on how and why American politics works the way it does. There's much awry in American politics, and I won't in this book attempt to catalog all of it. But I've come to believe the master story, the one that drives almost all divides and most fundamentally shapes the behavior of participants, is the logic of polarization. That logic, put simply, is this: to appeal to a more polarized public, political institutions and political actors behave in more polarized ways. As political institutions and actors become more polarized, they further polarize the public. This sets off a feedback cycle. To appeal to a yet more polarized public, institutions must polarize further. When faced with yet more polarized institutions, the public polarizes further, and so on. Understanding that we exist in relationship with our political institutions, that they are changed by us and we are changed by them, is the key to this story. We don't just use politics for our own ends. Politics uses us for its own ends. There are many different types of polarization possible, and I'll discuss some of them later in the book, but the locus of polarization I'll discuss is on political identity. And that requires saying a few words about a term that should be very useful in American politics, but that has become almost useless: identity politics. A core argument of this book is that everyone engaged in American politics is engaged in identity politics. This is not an insult, and it's not controversial. We form and fold identities constantly, naturally. Identity is present in politics in the way gravity, evolution, or cognition is present in politics. That is to say, it is omnipresent in politics because it is omnipresent in us. There is no way to read the literature on how humans form and protect their personal and group identities, literature I will survey in this book, and believe that any of us is immune. It runs so deep in our psyches, so activated so easily by even weak cues and distant threats, that it is impossible to speak seriously about how we engage with one another without discussing how our identities shape that engagement. Unfortunately, the term identity politics has been weaponized. It is most often used by speakers to describe politics as practiced by members of historically marginalized groups. If you're black and you're worried about police brutality, that's identity politics. If you're a woman and you're worried about the male-female pay gap, that's identity politics. But if you're a rural gun owner decrying universal background checks as tyranny, or a billionaire CEO complaining that high tax rates demonize success, or a Christian insisting on nativity scenes in public squares, well, that's just good old-fashioned politics. With a quick sleight of hand, identity becomes something that only marginalized groups have. The term identity politics in this usage obscures rather than illuminates. It's used to diminish and discredit the concerns of weaker groups by making them look self-interested, special pleading in order to clear the agenda for the concerns of stronger groups, which are framed as more rational, proper topics for normal political debate. But in wielding identity as a blade, we have lost it as a lens, blinding ourselves in a bid for political advantage. We're left searching in vain for what we refuse to allow ourselves to see. All politics is influenced by identity. Those identities are most powerful when they are so pervasive as to be either invisible or uncontroversial. American is an identity. So too is Christian. When politicians, including the irreligious, end speeches with "God bless America," it's not because they're making an appeal to a higher power, but because they're making an appeal to our bedrock identities. If you don't believe me, ask yourself why there are so few open atheists or even agnostics in national politics. This does not mean that politics is an equation solved by locating identity. Identity shapes our worldview, but it does not mechanistically decide it. And while we often speak of identity as a singular, it is always a dizzying plural. We have countless identities, some of them in active conflict with each other, others lying dormant until activated by threat or fortune. Much that happens in political campaigns is best understood as a struggle over which identities voters will inhabit come election day. Will they feel like workers exploited by their bosses, or heartlanders dismissed by coastal elites? Will they vote as patriotic traditionalists offended by NFL players who kneel during the national anthem, or as parents worried about the climate their children will inhabit? What we are often fighting over in American politics is group identity and status, fights that express themselves in debates over policy and power, but cannot be truly reconciled by either. Health policy is positive-sum, but identity conflict is zero-sum. The book Why We're Polarized by Ezra Klein.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Let me give you a little background on this first, and then I'm going to pick up your phone calls here. We've got a guest at the bottom of the hour. Won't be a real long time, and we can continue our conversation about this train wreck we saw last night. Or maybe it wasn't a train wreck. Maybe what it was, just a really visible manifestation of what's real right now. We have a racist president calling out to racially based, racially motivated terrorists in the United States to disrupt our elections. There's no other way to say it. And on top of that, we had a so-called debate in which very little debating went on. Instead, it was just yelling and tantruming. I mean, the Lincoln Project has an ad out today with pictures of Trump doing what he was doing and the sound of a baby crying over it. I mean, we know he has the emotional maturity of a 7-year-old, but even to talk like that diminishes how serious this is. This is the problem that Germany had in the early 30s when everybody was making fun of Adolf Hitler because he was that funny guy with the mustache who was always doing the Mussolini salute. What's with that? And nobody took him seriously. Take this guy seriously. So anyhow, the Commission on Presidential Debates just issued a statement saying, and I quote, "Last night's debate made clear that additional structure should be added to the format of the remaining debates to ensure a more orderly discussion of the issues." Now, they haven't figured out what they're going to do. They thanked Chris Wallace for his, quote, professionalism and skill, and they said that future debate moderators will have, quote, additional tools to maintain order. I'm guessing that'll be something like, what are those air horns that clowns have in the circus? What? Like that, or a maybe a giant hook will come out from the side, from behind the curtain, or maybe we could have a bucket of water up above the ceiling that drops. Trump is so afraid of water messing up his hair that he wouldn't even go to on the memorial for D-Day. He wouldn't even go to the veterans. Cemetery, because, my hair could get messy or moist or whatever. But anyhow, they say the CPD will be carefully considering the changes it will adopt and will announce those measures shortly. Joe Biden was asked about this, not specifically about the Commission on Presidential Debates, but about what happened last night. And, and are you going to show up with this guy again? And Biden said, "Sure, the American people," and probably to his credit, putting up with what he put up with. I mean, I debate people for a living. I've been doing it on this program for 16 years, I think, maybe 17 years. Since 2003, whatever that is, 17 years. And before that, I used to debate politics with my dad. I mean, I grew up debating. And, truth be told, there have been a few times over the years where I've had people on who basically did the same thing Trump did last night. It happens when I go on Fox News, for sure, although it's been a while since I've been there. But, and that is kind of the Fox News world. It's cage fight. It's, just throw them in and let them fight it out. Which, seems to work for the people who watch Fox News, but I don't think it works for the rest of America. And I think it's one of the reasons why Trump is stuck at 30%, because that's basically the Fox News market. This is the world that Rupert Murdoch has built. He built this world first in Australia and ruined that country. As Kevin Rudd, the former Prime Minister of Australia, pointed out last year in a Sydney Morning Herald editorial titled, Rupert Murdoch is the cancer on Australian democracy. Then Kevin Rudd points out, former Australian Prime Minister Kevin Rudd points out, Murdoch went to the United Kingdom, where he bought the Times of London and a bunch of other newspapers. And he did the same thing to the UK and flipped their politics hard right. And then he moved to the United States with his wife, who was a Chinese spy, apparently. At least there's more than a few reports suggesting that. And flipped American politics. And in fact, apropos of that, there was a piece, I believe it was the Financial Times, I don't recall, I read several newspapers this morning, saying that China was elated with the results of yesterday's debate. Well, of course, anything that hurts America, the Chinese are very much in favor of. They just executed 20 American spies in China. 20 Chinese people who were spying on behalf of the United States. They cracked our code. They found them. They executed them. I don't know why this is not top of the news. Similarly, Mike Pompeo wants to go, he's a Catholic, right? So he wants to go have a private audience with the Pope. And the Pope said, no, I've had a private audience with the Pope, right? It was John Paul II, but I've had a private audience with the Pope. But Mike Pompeo, no, the Pope is not interested. Thank you very much. In fact, I spent several hours with the Pope, with Pope John Paul II. It's so bizarre. It is so bizarre what is going on right now. But anyhow, we're just bringing you up to date. Let's pick up some phone calls here. Rich in Indianapolis. Hey, Rich, what's up?
Hey, Tom, thank you so much. I wanted to bring something to people's attention that is, I think a point that's going to make all the 1% kind of crazy about Trump. And the idea is that his being forced as this example of what rich people get to do with their taxes is now out in the bloodstream of people's conversations in a way that it hadn't been. And this is something that we're not supposed to think about. I don't know if you can remember Leona Helmsley from Manhattan back in the 80s. She was a hotelier.
Only little people pay taxes.
There you go. Thank you. I'm so glad that it wasn't just me that remembered that.
Oh yeah. Who could have lived through that time and not remember it? Yeah, go ahead, Rich.
So it's this idea that I'm in Indiana, and the Aryan Brotherhood has its headquarters here in Indiana. It used to be the Klan that was given deference by Woodrow Wilson back in the day, and now we've got Trump giving deference to these other groups, and our intelligence agencies are saying these guys are a national security threat. And then Trump is playing footsie. And so between looking for support from these people that are so, I'm reminded of the scene in Mississippi Burning where the agent in charge of the investigation says, "Don't drag our investigation into the gutter." And then Gene Hackman spouts back, "These people crawled out of the sewer." And, we're dealing with people that are just horrific. And so he's looking for that support taught by Putin. And then he's, messing things up for the 1%. They're like, "Don't screw this up for us. You're this bad example of letting people know what we do."
David Sirota in his newsletter this morning pointed out how I'm doing this from memory. I don't have it right in front of me, but I'm pretty sure I'm remembering it correctly. That Steve Schwartzman is the head of Blackstone Group, this billion-dollar investing company, and his net, and he's a billionaire. His net worth has increased 27% since the coronavirus started. Number one. And number two, he is donating millions, I think it was $25 million. He is donating millions of dollars to Senate Republicans in order to get them reelected, to keep in place his tax breaks. It's to keep his tax breaks in place. The billionaires are worried, Rich. They are very, very worried. Rich, thank you. Spot on. I think that one of the major outcomes of this, just like, the Nixon scandal. I remember the Nixon impeachment scandals. I remember the Nixon bribery scandals in '74. What came out of that was a lot of good reform. Hopefully that'll happen again.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be right back, 15 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. Let's see here. Howard in Mapleton, Illinois. Hey, Howard, what's up?
I would like to suggest that maybe the Electoral College, if only say 10% of the voters voted the presidential election within that state, then they only get 10% of those Electoral College votes. If 50%,
you're talking about something called proportional representation.
Right. according to the electorals that elect in that state. If nobody goes to the polls and votes for the presidency, then they lose all their electoral votes. And then, like in the House of Representatives, we have a House Representative Darren LaHood, who's run opposed many times, not opposed to having anybody, and he gets less than 20% of the votes that can be voted for him. So they should eliminate that House seat because there's no voter precipitation for that seat. What I'm saying is, without voter precipitation, they should lose their representation.
Yeah, I get it, Howard. I'm not, I'm not such a big fan of losing your representation, but I do think that proportional representation is a good idea, and frankly, it solves the problem. And thank you, Howard, for the call. It solves the problem that James Madison identified in Federalist Number 10, which is, the power of faction, essentially, and how, winner-take-all system, you can really only have two political parties. And the good news is the founders and framers understood the problem. The bad news is they had no solution. It wasn't until 1860 or 1859 that John Stuart Mill wrote On Liberty, his famous book in which he laid out the idea of proportional representation, which is how every, with the exception of Australia and New Zealand, how every other democracy in the world does it now, and Greece. I think the Greek parliament is not proportional representation. But, it's like, people are figuring this out. Frank in Everett, Washington. Hey, Frank, what's on your mind today?
Hi, yes. I'd just like to make a statement and turn it into a question here. And that would be that I don't understand, if you take this back to the beginning, when Trump became the candidate, how that's even possible that he could have been the candidate. Why is there not more of a vetting process, where we didn't know that he didn't pay his taxes, that he was with prostitutes, that he had deals with Russia? Like, why didn't people know that and stop that from the beginning? And I think, we have to think towards the future, and we have to think, how are we going to stop this from happening again? So maybe some plans.
Yeah. I do. Frank, the Democrats in the House proposed, this was just this week, I think it was Monday or Tuesday of this week, they laid out, and I don't recall if they passed it as a bill or whether it's just proposed legislation or whether it's in committee, but they have laid out a series of steps to reduce the power of the executive branch and increase and strengthen the oversight functions of Congress over the executive branch. And I think, it's long overdue. We've seen creeping power grabs in the executive branch since Nixon. And every Republican administration gets worse, and every Democratic administration doesn't do anything about it. So, we need some serious reforms. And frankly, I think that if we can extract this cancer from our democracy, from our republic, Donald Trump, that there's a very good chance that that's exactly what will happen. Just like what happened, after Nixon got extracted from the White House. Frank, thanks for the call. We'll be right back. Stick around. The hidden history of the war on voting tells how the GOP has been stealing elections for decades and will again this year unless we stop them.
So for our Thom Hartmann Insider videotape that is over, or videotape, YouTube, whatever you want to call it, private video that's available over at thomhartmann.com. I'm talking this week about Donald Trump just completely giving in to Erdogan of Turkey, the president of Turkey, the dictator of Turkey now. And this theory that Jared Kushner okayed the killing, at least the capture, perhaps the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, and to Mohammed bin Salman, and that Erdogan has the tape of it, and that when he called up Donald Trump a couple weeks ago and said, I want you to pull out of Syria and give me those Kurds so I can kill them and take that land, that he did it because Erdogan threatened him. And then Erdogan comes to the United States, a week or two later and gets a whole state dinner thing. Check it all out. It's over at thomhartmann.com. I think you'll find it fascinating. So for our Thom Hartmann welcome back.
Wynn in Solon, Maine. Hey, Wynn, what's on your mind today?
No, I haven't moved south to Mass yet, Tom. Okay, this is from one increased consumptive drinker to another, I guess.
Okay.
I want to tell you, I thought that the debate last night was a total success. I mean, if there wasn't anything else, it was a display of what we have here, this clown trying to become president again. I mean, this was great. I thought Joe Biden showed in a lot of times there his vulnerability. In fact, he even stuttered a few times, but he was sincere. Mm-hmm. And I'm not somebody I'm not a Biden fan at all. But I'll tell you what, seeing him last night, I'm totally on his wagon now. I mean, it just, he warmed my heart. Yeah. I thought that was the best. I thought that was the best episode of Apprentice I ever watched, to tell you the truth.
Win from your lips to God's ears. I hope you are absolutely right, and I suspect you are. And as I mentioned earlier, the two things I did last night as a result of watching this thing and halfway through, or about a third of the way through it in both cases, is I opened a bottle of wine and I sent $100 to the Biden campaign.
Good on
resolved that I was going to talk about it on the air today too, and just tell you what's going on, because I'm with you. I think that this did a lot more damage to Donald Trump than he realized, or that the people around him realized. I think as the stories get out about how his family told the doctors in the room that they were not going to wear their damn mask, screw you, that it just shows the arrogance of this family. The fact that Donald Trump has been fronting money for billionaire oligarchs and laundering money and not paying taxes and all this stuff. I mean, it is so clear that this guy is a corrupt wannabe dictator and not a particularly good one. And what we need to do is fix our republic. So when somebody like Tom Cotton comes along, who actually could be a competent dictator because he's got a little bit more intellect than Donald Trump, we're ready for it. And and it's regulated. But Win, spot on. I can't disagree with you. I couldn't agree with you more. Ramesu, am I saying that right, in Birmingham, Alabama?
How we doing, my man?
What's up?
Hey, I got through watching the debates last night, and not only do I want to scream, which I probably did last night too many times, but I've been screaming for months. I mean, Donald Trump is a
Ramesu, if I can interrupt you, please, put the microphone for your phone right next to your mouth. If it's on speaker, it's not a problem as long as the microphone's right next to your mouth. Otherwise, it sounds like you're talking to us from the toilet.
No, what I was saying is, I've been screaming for months. Donald Trump is a fascist. I mean, it's on full display. I mean, divide, conquer, pitting one group against another, scapegoating, ultra capitalist. I'm at the point now. I mean, what can we do about it? Because it can happen here.
Yeah. Well, it has happened here. It's just it hasn't reached. We're in the cancer stage of this right now, but it has not yet metastasized. It's spread through the executive branch. It's starting to spread through the judicial branch, and obviously, some of it has spread into the legislative branch. But I still think that this cancer can be extracted. It's going to take an overwhelming response. And by the way, it's not enough to just get the president kicked out or replaced by Joe Biden. You're in Alabama. Doug Jones is in a race for his life, his political life down there. And I am remembering that right? Doug Jones, Alabama?
Yes. He's my senator.
Yeah, so
yes.
Yeah, he needs some serious help because he's down a couple of points in the polls, and he's a good man. And so we all have
confident Doug Jones will win. Tommy Tuberville, another passenger on the Clown Bus Express, Yeah.
Well, I hope you're right. I really hope you're right. Ramesu, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Sally in Roundup, Montana. Hey, Sally, what's on your mind?
Hi. I watched last night, and I was so absolutely disgusted. What I wanted to say was, I've heard Trump say in various programs that he doesn't want to leave office and that he, in all probability, will be in for life. And then he was inciting violence last night if he loses. I have an horrible gut feeling that this idiot is going to get us in a hot war. He's in order to stay in. And I hope to God.
That's a concern I have as well. And I think that he's doing a dance with Iran right now. I mean, he pulls out of the Iran deal, which is, what provides for sanctions against Iran. And then 2 weeks ago, he doubles down on the sanctions, saying that, well, we're still part of the deal, but we're not part of the deal. In other words, it's just a complete BS made-up thing that him and Pompeo and Pence are doing. And I think that they're trying to provoke a shooting war with Iran. I think he thinks that, the bet that he's making is that not only can the United States defeat Iran, but that we would bring Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates into it. We have been loading both of those countries up with weapons over the objections of Congress for the last year and a half. And I think it's all in anticipation of a hot conflict with Iran. And I think Netanyahu, is enthusiastic about that too. And all of that really concerns me. Sally, thank you for the call. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And I think, frankly, the best way to prevent it is for us to be speaking out loudly to our members of Congress, particularly Republicans, and saying, enough.
Today we're reading from Dorfman and Mallart's book, How to Read Donald Duck, Imperialist Ideology in the Disney Comic. And this is from the preface to the English edition. This book was first published in Spanish. To say that this book was burnt in Chile should not come as a surprise to anyone. Hundreds of books were destroyed and thousands more prohibited and censored. It was written in the middle of 1971, in the middle of the Chilean revolutionary process. Copper had been rescued, the land was being returned to the peasantry, the whole Chilean people were recovering the industries that during the 20th century had been the means of enrichment for Mr. Rockefeller, Grace, Guggenheim, and Morgan. Because this process was intolerable to the United States government and its multinational corporations, it had to be stopped. They organized a plan which at the time was suspected and since has been confirmed by Mr. Kissinger, Ford, and Colby to have been directed and financed by the United States intelligence services. Their objective was to overthrow the constitutional government of Chile. To realize their objective, an invisible blockade was imposed. Credits were denied, spare parts purchased for industrial machinery were not sent, and later the Chilean state bank accounts in the U.S. were blocked, and an embargo preventing the sale of Chilean copper throughout the world was organized. There were, however, two items which were not blocked: planes, tanks, ships, and technical assistance for the Chilean armed forces, and magazines, TV serials, advertising, and public opinion polls for the Chilean mass media, which continued for the most part to be in the hands of a small group which was losing its privileges. To me, with those of the U.S., their media prepared the climate for the bourgeois insurrection, which finally materialized some years later on the 11th of September, 1973. Each day, with expert U.S. advice, in each newspaper, each weekly, each monthly magazine, each news dispatch, each movie, and each comic book, their arsenal of psychological warfare was fortified. In the words of General Pinochet, the point was, quote, to conquer the minds, end quote, while in the words of Donald Duck in the magazine Dislandia, published in December 1971, coinciding with the first mass rallies of native fascism, the so-called March of the Empty Pots and Pans, the point was to, quote, restore the king. But the people did not want the restoration of the king, nor of the businessman. The popular Chilean cultural offensive, which accompanied the social and economic liberation, took multiple forms: wall paintings, popular papers, TV programs, motion pictures, theater, songs, literature. In all areas of human activity with differing degrees of intensity, the people expressed their will. Perhaps the most important arm of this offensive was the work of the state publishing house, Quimantu, a word meaning sunshine of knowledge in the language of the Chilean Machupe Indians. In 2.5 years, it published 5 million books, twice the amount that had been published in all of Chile during the previous 70 years. In addition, it transformed the content of some of the magazines that it inherited from before the popular unity government and created new ones. It is in this multifaceted context, with the people on the march to cultural liberation, a process which also meant criticizing the mass cultural merchandise exported so profitably by the U.S. into the Third World, that How to Read Donald Duck was generated. We simply answered a practical need. It was not an academic exercise. For the Mad Dog Warriors on that September 11th, there were no paintings on the walls. There were only enormous stains which dirtied the city in memory. They, using the fascist youth brigades, whitewashed all the signing, many-colored walls of the nation. They broke records, murdered singers, destroyed radios and printing presses, imprisoned and executed journalists, so that nothing would be left to remind anybody of anything about the struggle for national liberation. But it was not enough to clean these cultural stains from the street. The most important task was to eliminate all those who bore the stain inside themselves, the fighters, workers, peasants, employees, students, and patriotic soldiers, to eliminate these creators of a new life, to eliminate this new life which grew, and for all that we created. This book, conceived for the Chilean people and our urgent needs, produced in the midst of our struggle, is now being published far from Chile in the uncle land of Disney, behind the barbed wire network of ITT. Mr. Disney, we are returning your duck, feathers plucked and well roasted. Look inside, you can see the handwriting on the wall, our hands still writing on the wall, Donald, to go home. This is written in 1975. And then this from David Kunzel's introduction. The names of the presidents changed. That of Disney remains. 46 years after the birth of Mickey Mouse, 8 years after the death of his master, Disney's may be the most widely known North American name in the world. He is arguably the century's most important figure in bourgeois popular culture. He has done more than any single person to disseminate around the world certain myths upon which that culture has thrived, notably that of an innocence supposedly universal, beyond place, beyond time, and beyond criticism. The myth of U.S. political innocence is at last being dismantled, and the reality which it masks lies in significant areas exposed to public view. But the great American dream of cultural innocence still holds a global imagination in thrall. The first major breach into the Disney of this dream was made by Richard Schickel's The Disney Version, The Lifetimes and Commerce of Walt Disney, the book How to Read Donald Duck.
Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. So we've got a new video up for regular supporters of our program over at ThomHartmann.com, and this is about just a totally bizarre story about these three guys with no VA experience, not even veterans, who are all big shots down at Mar-a-Lago, that Donald Trump has put in charge of the Veterans Administration functionally. And their association, one of them is the head of Marvel Entertainment, their association with Johnson & Johnson and the New York Stock Exchange, and Johnson & Johnson, the big drug company, taking this very, very cheap chemical, ketamine, tweaking the molecule a little bit and rolling it out as a new anti-suicide drug, Spravato, that in clinical trials caused 6 people to die, 3 of them by suicide, and none of the people taking the placebo to die. And now Trump is telling the VA, you have to buy this highly inflated price drug from Johnson & Johnson, and the Democrats want to know what's up with the VA crowd guys. Check it out. It's at ThomHartmann.com.
Thank you.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Tanya Sanerib is on the line with us. She is an international legal director and senior attorney with the Center for Biological Diversity. And the biologicaldiversity.org is the website. And Center for BioDIV is the Twitter handle. And the lead author on a new report, America's Massive Wildlife Imports Fuel Global Pandemic Risks. Tanya, welcome to the program. Tell us about this.
Thank you so much for having me. Well, the main point here, Thom, is guess what? The U.S. is a big part of the problem when we look at pandemic risk worldwide. We take up 20% of the global wildlife trade. And I don't think most people realize that.
20% of the global wildlife. I don't think the average person has any idea about this. Is this isn't big game hunter? I mean, what is this? How do we end up with that?
Right. So our report looked specifically at three kinds of animals. We looked at bats, rodents, and primates. Why did we look at those guys? Well, they are the animals that right now, of all the zoonotic viruses that we know about, and these are just the known ones, these species harbor 75% of those viruses. So when we're thinking about future disease risk, these types of animals, they're a big player. And it turns out the U.S. over a recent 5-year period imported over 20 million parts, products, bodies, skins, jewelry, blood samples, you name it, from bats, primates, and rodents.
Wow. And bats brought us SARS and COVID, and rodents brought us the bubonic plague, via their fleas. And I'm assuming other diseases, there's a virus down in the Southwest that rodents spread through their urine. And then primates, of course, brought us HIV, AIDS. I'm sure there's other diseases.
Absolutely, absolutely. But one of the really interesting things that we found in this report and doing this analysis is the majority of those imports into the U.S., there are dead animals. We do some amount of live trade in bats and rodents and primates, absolutely, but the vast majority of our imports are dead. And that means that the U.S., while our disease risk isn't that high because dead specimens aren't as risky as live animals are, it means that we're outsourcing our disease risk. And so we analyzed the top 5 exporting countries for all three, bats, rodents, and primates. And guess what? China made the list for all three. And that means that, we've been pointing our finger at China saying they're the problem here for this disease. But in fact, U.S. consumer demand is a part of the problem. We have demand for bats, rodents, primates. They're all coming from China and other global hotspots around the world. So we can't just point our fingers at other countries. That was one of the things that really leapt out at me. The other part of the analysis we did is we looked at why are we bringing these animals across our border. And it turns out commercial demand, so things that people buy at stores, they made the top 3 reasons. So it's commercial demand, scientific research, biomedical research. Those are the top 3 reasons. And so for us as consumers, we're importing bats encased in acrylic for paperweights, primate skulls and skeletons to decorate our homes, and rodent fur for fishing flies.
Really? Wow, for fishing flies. That's amazing.
Basically, trinkets. We're looking for trinkets. And that's what's fueling our demand for the wildlife. And that's a huge problem from a disease risk standpoint. It's also a big problem, though, for the biodiversity crisis.
Right. So essentially what we're doing is we're going to poorer countries around the world and we're saying, go into your most pristine habitats, go into the areas where humans don't normally go, and acquire these animals so that you can sell them to us and we will give you money. And then when those people are interacting with those animals, they get diseases. And ultimately those diseases can go worldwide, as we've seen with everything from HIV to SARS to COVID. And geez, what a mess. Is there, what's the solution to this, Tanya? Is it legislative? Is it cultural? What do we do about this?
All of the above, definitely. So I think the first thing, the most important thing that the U.S. needs to do, and this is true for the U.S. and other big consumer markets, the EU, China, Japan, we are the main consumers of wildlife around the world. We need to throw up trade moratoria. We need to put in place a ban and say we're drawing down U.S. demand. So that's the first thing that we have to do. Obviously, that's going to have ripple effects around the world. So we need to have funding for transitions of livelihoods away from the wildlife trade to other professions. And then the other key thing is that we have to work on conservation of biodiversity. We're in the midst of an extinction crisis globally. The U.S. needs to refocus our priorities and ensure that we're leading in this quest to conserve nature. It's a lot. It's a lot we have to tackle. But if you listen to the scientists, what they're saying is we have to transform our entire relationship with nature. And that starts with the wildlife trade ban.
Do you have any champions in Congress?
Well, interestingly, just yesterday, a bill was introduced by Cornyn and Booker, and it's a great start. Basically, what it does is it would end wildlife markets in the U.S. It provides a lot of funding for the U.S. to work globally, not just on getting rid of wildlife markets, but also on conserving nature, which I just said is really crucially important, enforcing wildlife laws. And then it would restrict U.S. imports and exports of live wildlife, just terrestrial species, for food and for medicine. So it's a really good first start, but I think that we have a lot more work to do.
Yeah, that's remarkable. That's John Cornyn of Texas and Cory Booker of New Jersey?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. Oh, good guys. I mean, I'm not a big fan of John Cornyn, but, you know, I'm glad he co-sponsored this. Tanya, it's an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. And I'm assuming people can get all the information they need about this over at biologicaldiversity.org, your organization.
That's absolutely right.
Great. Tanya, thank you so much. Tanya Sanerib is the International Legal Director and Senior Attorney with the Center for Biological Diversity and the lead author of this new report, America's Massive Wildlife Imports Fuel Global Pandemic Risks, and really worth checking out. Tanya, thank you again for dropping by.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Take care.
My pleasure. Keep up the great work. You are doing God's work. It's important stuff. Rennie in let's pick up some phone calls here. Rennie in Reno, Nevada. Hey, Rennie, what's on your mind today?
Well, first I'd like to say my go-to endorphin is chocolate instead of wine. So that's what I do. I eat chocolate. I have piggybacking on what you said about the reform. Do you think that we'd have more forward movement in this country if we have a Democratic Senate, a Democratic Congress, even if Trump wins?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, frankly, though, the odds of Mike Pence, the odds of Joe Biden winning the election for president are greater than the odds of the Democrats taking the Senate, although it's looking increasingly. I mean, you know, Trump's train wreck yesterday, I think it's going to hurt him. I think it's going to hurt the entire Republican Party.
So on November 3rd, can there be a whole lot of controversy and conflict of some of the Democratic that might get in as senators and Congress people? Will there be that same kind of fight? Can they fight on November 3rd the same way they can fight with the presidency if they win?
I don't know what you mean.
So if a Democrat wins the Senate, the Democrats win the Senate, the new ones, and the Congress still.
Oh, they're not sworn in until the first of the year.
Okay.
The one exception to that, and there might be two exceptions to that, are where there's a special election, and I think it's Arizona and Mark Kelly, but versus Sally or Martha McSally. But I may be wrong on that. It may be a different special election, but there's one special election that's happening in the Senate where that person is going to be sworn in before the first of the year. But I doubt that that's going to... say that again, Sean? Yeah, it is Mark Kelly. Okay, Sean just confirmed my belief. And so, you know, for anybody living in Arizona, I mean, that's a really, really important race. That could take the Senate down to 3 votes. A lot's going to depend on the timing of all this, and I think this is one of the reasons why Trump is so, you know, in such a frantic hurry to get Auntie Amy on the court. Rennie, I got to run, but thank you for the call. We'll be back. It's 45 minutes past the hour. Back with more of your calls. Also, I've got to tell you about the Multnomah County Sheriff. Donald Trump shouted out to our sheriff last night. Our sheriff is shouting back. And also, I wanted to share Louise's thoughts on this with you. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
45 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a moment. Welcome back. Dan in Sherman Oaks, California. Hey, Dan, what's up? Dan? Okay. Dan's been on hold for quite a while, Joyce, so I'm going to put him back on hold. He's on line 2. If you can check that out and find out what's going on. Barbara in Chicago Heights, Illinois. Hey, Barbara, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I listened to Nancy Pelosi this morning discuss the 12th Amendment, and she was discussing about there were 26 Republican-controlled legislatures, 22 Democratic-controlled, and I forgot what her explanation was for the other two. I don't know if they're independent or something else. They're split. That's what she said. Okay. And as she was discussing that, she was talking about flipping. Oh, this is what she said. She said there had to be a majority in order for that to be effective. So she was talking about flipping. It sounded like she was talking about flipping legislatures.
Mm-hmm.
So my okay.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Tom.
You didn't get your question, Barbara. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm listening.
Well, okay. So she's talking about that if we're flipping them, they're not seated until January. So is she's talking about, well, if we do end up with the 12th Amendment, that situation itself, that they can override it because in January they can override, they'll have more control as opposed to not having the majority. So I was trying to understand exactly what she was saying.
I don't fully understand it myself, Barbara. I know how the 12th Amendment works, and I know how it worked back in 1876, and times are a little different now. And she's right that and Donald Trump, by the way, has said this a couple of times. There's 26 states that have Republican-controlled legislatures, 22 that are Democratically controlled, and then whatever the difference is, 2 or 3 where it's split. But whether it's possible to flip those legislatures in time for them to have some say in their electoral vote is a huge question mark. I mean, the deadline. The drop dead date for all of this is January 20th. That's the date that the new president is inaugurated, and that the old president's term of office automatically expires at noon. So if they are expecting that this is going to get dragged past the first of the year, and if these states swear their new congressional delegations in the first week of January, for example, then, maybe. But if Trump can get this resolved before the end of January, then it may not work. Although there may be some states where, they have the election in November and they swear them in December. I'm not that familiar with the state-by-state law. This is the problem with this whole 12th Amendment thing, is that so much of it is dependent upon the individual state laws and how they administer their elections. And I tried to do a deep dive on this back in March when I wrote that long article for Alternate about it. And it is really difficult to dig into that information.
Okay, so we're still muggy about that.
We're still figuring it out. But listen to Nancy. Okay. She's, if anybody knows, Nancy Pelosi knows. So, but they're doing everything they can. Okay. Thanks a lot, Barbara. It's great to hear from you. I appreciate the call. We'll be right back. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. Stick around. The hidden history of the Supreme Court tells the story of Nixon and Reagan's committing treason to steal the White House. So we've got a new video up for regular supporters of our program over at ThomHartmann.com, and this is about just a totally bizarre story about these 3 guys with no VA experience, not even veterans, who are all big shots down at Mar-a-Lago, that Donald Trump has put in charge of the Veterans Administration functionally. And their association, one of them is the head of Marvel Entertainment, their association with Johnson & Johnson and the New York Stock Exchange, and Johnson & Johnson, the big drug company, taking this very, very cheap chemical ketamine, tweaking the molecule a little bit, and rolling it out as a new anti-suicide drug, Spravato, that in clinical trials caused 6 people to die
3 of them by suicide, and none of the people taking the placebo to die. And now Trump is telling the VA, you have to buy this highly inflated price drug from Johnson & Johnson. And the Democrats want to know what's up with the VA crowd guys. Check it out. It's at ThomHartmann.com.
So 2 real quick things. Number 1, last night Donald Trump was talking about how the police in Portland love him and the sheriff in Portland loves him. Well, the sheriff in Portland, he's the sheriff actually of the county, Multnomah County, which is Portland essentially. And his name is Mike Reese. His Twitter handle is Sheriff Reese, R-E-E-S-E, like the Reese's Pieces. And he tweeted last night, in tonight's presidential debate, the president said that the sheriff of Portland supports him. As the Multnomah County sheriff, I can tell you, I do not support Donald Trump, and I will never support him. And then he goes on to say, Donald Trump has made my job a hell of a lot harder, by the way he's talking about Portland, but I never thought he'd turn my wife against me. Apparently his wife saw that and said, wait a minute, you support Trump? So, which brings me to my wife. Louise is, this is a woman who has run several multi-million-dollar companies in her lifetime. She's done just extraordinary things, in addition to parenting 3 children. And when the debate was over last night, she made this comment to me. And I really hope this is true, and I believe it probably is. And for the women who are calling in after this, and we can talk about this tomorrow as well, let me know if you feel the same way. But basically, Louise said, we recognize Donald Trump. We know who that guy is. That guy, right? Or this guy, this is, women are familiar with these male, I was going to say a word that I can't say on the air, fools who are just full of their own self-importance and full of testosterone and full of, I'm the big bully and I'm the man here and, back off and I'm going to interrupt you and blah, 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 blah. And Louise's comment was, we know this. Trump really did a good job last night of revealing who he really is to the country. And while there may be some men who are looking at him going, whoa, he's the kind of manly man that I'd like to be, I think that may be true of the Small Penis Gun Club, a.k.a. the Proud Boys, etc. But I don't think that that's true of most of America's, particularly suburban women, the people that Donald Trump thinks that he's courting. So we'll see. We'll see. Anyhow, Larry in Orlando. Hey, Larry, what's up?
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
Hello? Larry.
Yeah, good. What's on your mind?
I get sick and tired of hearing Donald Trump tell that damn lie that black folk is for him. That's a lie. He got fuel for Donald Trump. Black people can't stand Donald Trump. And I know I'm one of them. That's a damn sure.
Okay. I got it, Larry.
That he's for black people.
Yeah. Well, he's done more for black people than anybody except Abraham Lincoln. Right. He's done more for everybody than anybody since so-and-so. Yeah, Larry, I get it, and I totally get it. Thank you very much. Mary in Shellsburg, Pennsylvania. Hey, Mary, what do you think of Louise's observation?
Well, I'm calling, I don't know about Louise's observation, but I'm calling about how Trump would not denounce the white supremacists last night at the debate. And right. He mentioned that something about that they're standing by, and it occurred to me that I think he's planning that they're going to come to the White House to defend him physically when we try to take him out of the White House. Do you think this is possible?
I think he has fantasies of a civil war, but I don't think that there's enough of these violent white racists, terrorists, in the United States to do what he wants done. They are a relatively small minority. They're a fringe minority. They're being increasingly marginalized. The FBI and other police agencies are starting to very seriously look at these folks. I think he is massively overestimating the power, essentially, that they have, and I'm not terribly worried about it. Mary, thank you for the call. Trudy in Gurnee, Illinois. Hey, Trudy, what's up? Got the last minute
Hi,
here.
Tom.
Oh, great. I was wondering what you thought of Mitt Romney's he's not going to be one of the 4 senators that we need. I'm looking at what he's done since January.
He's already said that.
I thought he's been kind of progressive because, what was he, the only Republican to vote in favor of convicting Trump? But I wasn't fooled by it. But a lot of my friends were surprised that he's not going to be, and I was wondering, why do you think he isn't going to be one?
Because he's a Republican. This is all about power. They're talking about if they can get Auntie Amy on the court. She's 48 years old? She's going to be there for another 30 or 40 years issuing these right-wing decisions that are largely to the benefit of billionaires like Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney is a billionaire, and he represents the interests of billionaires. So, surprise, surprise, he wants a woman on the court who is going to defend the rights of billionaires and has in over 70% of the rulings that she's made on the 7th Circuit. Trudy, I'm sorry, but we're out of time. Thank you for the call. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires you. We saw a full-blown assault on our democratic institutions, particularly our vote, which is what Thomas Paine called the beating heart of democracy. We saw a full-out assault on that last night. We need to fight back, and the way we do that is by voting and getting everybody we know to vote. Tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are CarShield, America's #1 auto protection company. More information at carshield.com, code TOM. CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. Boll and Branch Sheets, crafted for the common good. More info at Boll, B-O-L-L, and branch.com, code TOM. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom. And TEEF, T-E-E-F, Smarter Pet Dental Health. For more information, teefhealth.com, code TOM.
We say fight back!